Julia jumped in shocked as Khai appeared. She shrieked, flinging her clothing as she ran into the nearest room she could find. She screamed when she found the door was locked. Fuck! She rushed back into the bathroom she had taken a bath in. Luckily, the door was still opened. She entered and slammed the door behind her. She rested against the door, panting. Her breathing calmed, and she almost smacked herself in the head when she realized she had left her panties on the living room floor in her rush to hide what little he was yet to see. Suddenly a knock came from the other side of the door. Her heart skipped a beat. She peeked through the eye hole to see Khai dangling her panties in his fingers. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice shaking as she fumbled for the lock. "You know, if you want me to fuck you, I'd be more than happy to do so. You do not have to resort to little party tricks like this." He sneered. She opened the door, grabbed her panties and bra, and slammed the door in his face before he could react. She slipped on her underwear and wrapped a towel around her body. Her hand hovered over the handle, as she contemplated just staying in the room till she died. The knock came again, louder this time. She rolled her eyes and pulled the door open. She could feel Khai following closely behind her, but she didn't look back. "I see we're still playing this game," Khai called from behind her. Julia rolled her eyes and kept walking. It was an accident, an honest mistake anyone could make. How could she have known that he would suddenly appear when he was supposed to be gone for days or at least a day? "For someone who acts so squirmish, you're suddenly so bold," he mocked. "I mean, knowing I'm your boss and an alpha. You still need a little lesson on respect when it comes to me, princess. Continue like this and I just might have to do the honors," he warned. Julia could feel his breath on her neck, but she forced her shaky hand still as she turned on him. "We're not at work," she corrected. "Plus, if you hated my character so much, you wouldn't have asked for more of it by asking me to live with you." She teased. "Something strong tells me you like my character. I mean, you signed a contract with me when you could have done so with any woman you wanted. So let's just say, I did exactly what you were hoping I would do." She looked him in the eye, daring him to say otherwise. Khai was shocked again by how brazen Julia was being. He walked away from her and into the room she had just walked out of, his room. Julia watched him leave, surprised he hadn't argued back. Realization dawned on her when she saw him preparing for bed from the opened door. He didn't even care that the door was still ajar as he pulled his shirt over his head and slipped his pants down. As he laid on the bed, Julia suddenly realized that there was just the one bed in the room. Julia rolled her eyes at how uncaring he was being. She walked into the room. "Aren't you going to prepare a room for your guest?" she asked, her hand on her waist. Khai's brow creased in annoyance. She was defiling him, and she needed to be taught a lesson. Not only had she dared to enter his room without his permission, she was questioning him, sassily too. "I believe the bed is big enough for two. Dare I say double thag, so I don't see the problem here," he replied, his eyes still shut. Julia looked at him skeptical. What if he suddenly got too close and he lost control and suddenly need to get rid of the itch? There was no way she was taking that chance. But she tried arguing. "But nothing. You either sleep on the bed or do as you wish." He cut her off. "Now would you please? I'm trying to get some sleep," he snapped. "If you choose to waste the night, that's perfectly fine, but don't disturb me." He turned to the side, done with the back and forth. Julia balled her hands into fists to stop herself from punching him in the face. She grabbed a shirt and some pajamas pants from the living room and stomped to the sofa at the far corner of his room, making as many noises as she could on her way. She curled up on the sofa. It was big enough to serve as a bed, so her anger eased up, but she still felt like shooting him on the head. She closed her eyes to sleep, only to snap them open only an hour later. She tossed and turned on the sofa, her body shaking as the chill from the air conditioning hit her. Who ran their air conditioning so low? She frowned as she eyed him sleeping so peacefully on the bed. He was safely covered under bed sheets and duvets, and she eyed him with envy. Stupid ass. She uncurled and tiptoed to the bed. She peeled the duvet at the end farthest from him. She slipped under the covers quietly. Khai smirked as he felt her weight dip the far end of the bed. He let her settle in, soak in all the warmth the bed had to offer. When he was sure she had made herself comfortable enough, he rolled over to her side of the bed and wrapped her body from behind. The temperature in the room dropped, and Julia spotting closer to his body did nothing to help. Sweat drizzled down his temple as she got closer. He needed to clear his head. He picked out an armless shirt, some sweatpants, and his running shoes from the walk-in closet. It was his little secret getaway from everything. Not even Alex knew he exercised. He wouldn't understand. Khai slammed the door angrily behind him and began his run round the large expanse of land he owned. He didn't know who he was more angry with, Julia for being responsible for the strain in his pants, or himself for getting all excited even when Julia isn't trying to do anything sexy. And more annoying was the fact that the reason his dick was so hard slept soundly in his bedroom, totally unaffected. Julia woke up feeling more relaxed than she had in a long time. She tapped the spot beside her, half hoping to feel a certain man's chest. Her hope crashed as she felt more sheets. She looked around the room for him, but there was no sign he had even slept in the room. Her stomach rumbled loudly. Julia pushed back the sheets and stepped out of the room, only thoughts of food on her mind. She crossed the living room to where she had seen the kitchen earlier. She rummaged through the refrigerator. Her stomach cried in glee as she sighted some scanty ingredients in the inner section of the refrigerator. She grabbed the bacon, eggs, and pancake mix. She mixed up some batter and tasted it before turning a spoonful onto the pan. She hummed as she went about preparing the rest. She switched off the cooker and plated the food, the scent hitting her nostrils, making her salivate. Just then, Khai entered, panting and sweaty. She shamelessly watched as he walked to his room, oblivious to her presence. She got to making a coffee. A few minutes later, Khai walked into the kitchen smelling like pure temptation. Julia forced her eyes away from his chest just in time to see him slipping pancakes she had spent precious time making into his big mouth. "Hey!" she cried. "What? You shouldn't have made it so good if you didn't want me to touch it," he retorted. Julia rolled her eyes. If she was being honest, she wanted to smack him upside the head, but he was her boss. She gritted her teeth and went to get herself another plate, throwing daggers at him with her eyes. She took the stool beside his and dug in, her stomach rumbling its appreciation. She pulled her phone out to check her favorite gossip sites. Her eyes widened as she wiped to a picture of her and Khai hugging in a restaurant, the classy restaurant. Thankfully, it was just a back view, but still, anyone who knew her would know she was the one in the picture. She screamed at the next picture. It was a zoomed-in version of the first, emphasizing their joined hands. No, 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 just no. She didn't need Khai's fans drowning her with criticism and the typical "what does he see in her?" Her thoughts are slashed by a ringing noise. She watched as Khai picked up the call. "Do you have a girlfriend?" the voice asked. Khai looked to Julia. "Who is it?" Julia mouthed, her curiosity getting the best of her. He considered ignoring her, but shrugged instead. "Just my reporter friend," he said, pulling the phone far from his mouth. "Yes," he affirmed. Julia's eyes widened in shock at his reply. "Why?" she yelled. Khai hung up and smirked at her. "Why not?" he responded, hopping off the stool. "Our contract is only supposed to matter in the werewolf world," Julia pointed out. "Yeah, I've been regretting that particular part of the contract," he drawled. "I'm not supposed to suffer because of your regrets." Julia fired back. "Whatever," he said, still annoyed. He left her in the kitchen and went to get dressed for work. Julia followed suit. "You can use the car that brought you here to work. It's yours for now," he called before heading out. Julia paused. The lip gloss she held in her hand hovered over her lips. "Wait, what?" She shook her head. She would give him an earful later for not asking her first, but for now she was going to appreciate the beauty and speed of the car. She grabbed her bag and the keys the guy had given her. Now she understood why he hadn't asked for it all weekend. She headed out with worry in her heart. It hadn't been long since she'd arrived at the office when the HR director walked up next to her place to say hello. "Good morning, Julia." "Good morning, Mr. Bates," she greeted immediately. Julia had a twinge of uneasiness inside. Their department didn't have any plans to increase or decrease staff recently. How could the HR director find her? The boss messaged me yesterday, saying that there's an intern coming to the company. I saw that you were so busy last week that you didn't have time to go home, so I put her in your department, he said. Julia's eyes drifted to the person him, and her heart froze immediately. Ada. Ada smiled back at her. To anyone looking, it would look like she was simply happy to be assigned to Julia, but Julia knew better. Ada was anything but the humble enough to learn type. She was more of the I have got to rule the world type. Khai really knows how to get her into trouble. Julia shifted in her seat, uncomfortable with Ada's presence. She couldn't help it. She didn't feel safe with the woman who had threatened her life lurking around her work, her desk, her personal space. It was like giving the enemy free access to you. She forced her nervousness down and focused on her job. She felt a pair of eyes staring at her, and she looked up to see Ada was still around. You should take some time to familiarity yourself with the office and its staff, she suggested, gesturing towards everyone else but herself. Ada let her say her piece before asking, Have you thought about my proposal? She asked, her eyes still watching Julia closely. Julia forced a breath. If you're not here to work, then you can go back. Humph, the nerve. Khai might have announced you being his fiancé, but you should know it doesn't mean anything. Ada sneered at her. Julia shook her head. She couldn't help the pity she felt for Ada. Khai was busy paying for a pretend fiancé, and there Ada was having unrealistic expectations for the same man. Julia didn't respond to her statement. It had taken a few encounters, but she finally realized that there was not BNF she was going to say that would get across the woman's stubbornness. Ada eyed her for a very long, making Julia uncomfortable. Julia didn't know if she was jealous or annoyed that she wasn't paying more attention to her words. But whatever was going on in the woman's head was none of her business. All she knew was she was done speaking to a filter. Eventually you'd give up. I'd just wait for that day. Ada snapped before storming away from her desk. What a pampered princess. Never mind, whatever. She's not really here to work anyway. Just then a familiar face stepped out of the elevator. She had only seen pictures of the man, but she knew he was a client, one they had been expecting for a while. She immediately stood to her feet and greeted him with a smile. He smiled in return, and Julia guided him to her desk. She pulled out a seat for him before taking hers across from him. The interaction was brief but productive. At the end of it all cooperation details were finalized, and he was about to leave a happier man than when he had walked in. Julia caught sight of Ada, who was already approaching her desk again. She gestured her over, and surprisingly, she strutted to her desk without question. Please arrange a car to transport Mr. Sampson to the Star Heights Hotel, she instructed, expecting some form of argument to follow, but was surprised when Ada just nodded. But I have a quick errand to run. I'd be done in 5 minutes tops, Ada promised. Julia hated to admit it, but Ada was proving to be more reasonable than she had given her credit for. Sir, is that fine? Julia asked just to be sure the client didn't assume she wasn't thinking about their best interest. Sure, no problem, came his response. Julia watched in amazement as Ada directed the man to the elevator and got in with him. She returned back to her work, a satisfied woman. She checked her wristwatch and was pleased to discover that she had finished her duty before closing time. She began packing up her usual work bag when her intercom rang. She picked it up. My office, now, Khai ordered before she could even speak a word, and hung up before she could inquire further. Immediately she stepped through the door to his office. She could feel the fumed coming of his nostrils from just how angry he was. You left a customer freezing in the cold wind for several hours? Khai demanded, his glare pinned on her face. She hated that she even had to ask it. She knew it would only add coal to an already burning flame. This is not how professions work. At least not my professionals, he scolded. Julia felt the urge to strangle Ada, almost blind her, as she listened to Khai scold her for something she had no idea about. She pinned her lips shut to stop from mistakenly snitching. She would just have to be a step ahead with subsequent tasks. She nodded. Sorry, boss. It would not repeat itself again. At the end of the day, she had had it up to her head with Ada. Despite her choice to let the matter die, Ada had thrown sarcastic comments athwart the day. She was already stressed for working overtime, so Ada's comments were entirely unhelpful. "Aw, is little Miss Fiancé tired?" Ada teased. "If you put in any actual work, you would be, but I guess you're too busy doing absolutely nothing," Julia retorted. Ada opened her mouth as if to say something, only to shut it few seconds later. Julia turned in her seat to see Khai looking down at her. She couldn't tell if he was annoyed, sad, or just angry. Ada smirked at Julia and her stomach pitted. She knew what Ada had in mind. She planned to report Julia and her rude behavior toward here. Julia blew a breath, preparing for it. She waited for it. "Khai, I have," she began to say, but Khai ignored her and slipped his hand through Julia's hand and pulled her up from her desk, ignoring how she scrambled to pack the rest of her belongings. Julia followed him as he led them out of the office, leaving behind a stunned and aggravated Ada. Beneath the anger Ada felt was shame. She left the now empty desk angrily, glaring dagger at their backs. Once outside, Julia breathed in relief. "Thank you." She smiled, her heart warming as she thought to how protected she had felt thanks to him. "It was just to avoid Ada," Khai corrected coldly. Julia raised her fist behind Kai's head, the urge to punch growing stronger with each day. Why couldn't he just be a gentleman? She complained, do herself. They went home together after that. The ride was silent, but Julia appreciated it. She needed time to remind herself that Khai was no gentleman. Immediately they arrived home, she slipped into the bathroom, making sure to grab her change of clothes and underwear. She wasn't making that mistake twice. She quickly did her business, and as soon as she felt clean enough, she stepped out into the room, surprised to see an extra bed in the room. How had she not noticed that sooner? "Why don't you just give a different room?" she asked before she could think better of it. "Because there's an important dinner you have to attend with me tomorrow," he said coldly, barely looking her in the eye. Still confused, she arched a brow at him. Khai forced an exaggerated breath like she was being unnecessarily difficult before saying, "I do not want a sleep-deprived woman with panda eyes beside me," he snapped. His tone startled her, but she wasn't backing down that easily. "And you don't think I would get better sleep in a different room? If you ask me, I say moving me to the next room or the furthest is your best bet." She shrugged. "Can you just?" he began, his voice slightly raised. He forced a calming breath through his mouth. "Can you just sleep?" he asked in a much calmer tone. Julia knew how important the dinner was to Khai. He had spent a good minute of their ride there talking about it. He had gone on and on about the people that were going to present there, even answered her questions patiently and without any sign of annoyance at just how many they were. As soon as she opened her eyes, she was stunned by the room full of dresses and the immaculately dressed and efficient staff. Each staff moved swiftly and gracefully across the room, serving wine to whoever asked and giving directions to whoever needed them. The clear efficiency of the staff had been Julia's first source of amazement, but what really blew her off her heels were the dresses the ladies wore. The room was an array of different collections, from the short to the medium knee length to the long flowing type, some flared, others not, some with previous stones, some with flowers instead. They were all beautiful. Just then, Julia's eyes settled on Khai. He looked impeccable in his maroon three-piece suit. She watched with pleasure as the fabric creased with each step he took closer to her, showing the sheer beauty staying hidden underneath. She would love to explore, but what she found most entrapping was the way he looked at her like she was the only female in the room, like he couldn't care less if anyone else was present. All he needed was her. Her blood burned as he stood only inches from her, and she could see what she felt reflected in his eyes. Admiration, need, glee. "You look beautiful, Julia," he confessed, his eyes seeking her soul. Julia couldn't help the warmth that spread over her. "I love the way my name just rolls right off. Keep looking at me like that and I just might have nothing but your name on my lips," he warned. Julia's eyes instinctively drifted to his lips at his threat before her eyes widened when she realized she had said it out loud. "I'd be taking that as a promise, princess." He smirked, offering her a hand. She took it like it was second nature and let him lead them into the room filled with people Julia didn't know. She, however, knew enough to know they were important for the greater population. What she was unsure of was whether it was the human community or the werewolf community. Now spotting a blush that matched her maroon, ankle-length bodycon dress that she could swear Jessica Rabbit wore, she grabbed onto Khai's elbow for moral support as they moved deeper into the crowd. People turned as they passed, the awe in their eyes impossible to miss by anyone with eyes. Julia couldn't miss the whispers that followed. She was conflicted. She didn't know if whatever they were saying was relevant or not. Was it about her or her relationship with Khai? I still can't believe the Golden Bachelor finally has a fiancé, she heard a woman 2 guests away say. She turned to look at Khai to see him already looking at her. She blushed and looked away. She had no idea he was the Golden Bachelor until that moment, but she could definitely see the appeal. It had her stuck after all. Congratulations, Khai. A man with balding head approaches. He shook Khai's hand and placed a peck on Julia's hand. Khai followed the man's every move, following that one bold move. If the man noticed anyone shooting daggers with his eyes, he didn't show it. Soon a lot of other guests began flocking them, and congratulations after congratulations was all Julia heard, but she couldn't stop her heart from racing so fast. She knew why her body was reacting that way, but she wasn't going to accept it. On the outside, she was the typical calm, supportive fiancé, but if anyone bothered to even look through that facade even a little, they would see she was anything but. A man Julia swore she had seen somewhere before that night walked to them, and everyone else dispersed. Like he issues a command they all could hear, but Julia couldn't. Khai straightened beside her, and she's reminded that he was in fact beside her. The man soon stood before them, and it suddenly clicked in Julia's head. That pattern of hairstyle, his unique shiny gray hair, the laugh lines he always spotted that most before him didn't have. She suddenly realized why the face had looked so familiar. The president of this country. She suddenly felt the need to do just as the others have done, bow and move away from his path. The president gestured for them to follow. Khai nodded and did just that, pulling Julia with him. They arrive at the fart-jest corner of the room, the area free of any live form. I would like to congratulate you on the engagement. He smiled a big, bright smile that made Julia's tense body relax immediately. Thank you, Mr. President, Khai said, holding back a smile. Were they actually friends? Julia wondered. Pleasure is all mine, he waved off. It had been too sudden. One moment the president was smiling like a child who just found the cookie jar, and the next all jokes had been erased from his face. His eyes looked focused and calculating. Julia stood shell-shocked at how quickly his expression had changed from a go-happy, go-lucky guy to the president. Just then his eyes fell on her and she stiffened. He looked shocked for a moment, like he was only just seeing her before he turned to Khai and arched a brow, but didn't say anything else. We can trust Julia. She's my chosen human mate, Khai announced proudly, shocking both Julia and the president. Julia, because she had no idea their engagement would be something he would be proud of. Yes, he had admitted it when the reporter had asked, but that was for publicity. Now they were alone, with a man she knew he definitely shared more than a few secrets with, a man he didn't need to pretend that far with. The president's jaw stayed dropped from a few seconds before he shrugged it off. He was surprised with how honest Khai was being. He always was. It was why he felt a little at ease that he was the one representing the werewolves and not someone else. He didn't question him any further and just nodded. We need go implement a legal identity registration program for when werewolves enter the human community soon. The sooner the better. The president seemed to think about it for a moment. His brows remained furrowed. Why? He asked. I mean, we've not used it since, and so far things have been going great, so I'm just wondering, he explained. Khai nodded. Perfectly understandable. He accepted. My concerns rose from the issue we discussed last time about the attacks by Adrian and some of the rogues. Tracking them and their specific residences or locations has proven because they're not legally registered, and I feel it would help. I've seen how you track criminals and get their precise locations. It's something that could help with the wolves. he explained. I just feel it would be safer for you and your people that way, he added. The president spotted that thoughtful look again for a moment. After a long, torturous minute, he finally nodded. I would get people on that first thing tomorrow morning, he assured. But I must admit, I'm quite impressed and grateful for how much respect you've showed humans, he admitted, the smile back on his face. Khai returned the smile. The unspoken statement between them hung in the air, but none of them was going to acknowledge it. Khai knew that if their individual powers were tested, humans would fall short. The president knew it too, hence his surprise, but Khai never really saw it as that big of a deal. I appreciate it, the president added, because I have dealt with so many alphas, but none has been as friendly or taken so kindly to humans, and they're not even half as powerful as you are. The president continued. Khai couldn't help the pride that swelled in his chest at the man's statement. He knew that he was the most powerful alpha and has heard humans and wolves make reference to it, but not many appreciated his kindness despite it. Thank you too, Mr. President, he responded, spotting a ghost of a smile. The man waved it off. I only seek the truth everyone else is too chicken to admit, he said. His smile suddenly widened as he turned to Khai, who still paid more attention to Julia's hair than the conversation. You know what? How about after ruling the wolf pack as the alpha king, you maybe can speed up the process of breaking down the prejudice between humans and werewolves? The older man suggested, his smile growing brighter the longer they spoke. Kai's attention snapped back to him. What if a human wants to marry a werewolf? Immediately the question left her lips. Khai stiffened beside her. She wondered why, but waved it off to coincidence. He had announced their engagement freely only moments ago. Surely her question wouldn't be that big of a deal. The president looked between Julie and Khai and gave a wide grin. Oh, you need not worry your pretty hair over that. He smiled like they had an inside joke no one knew about. Julie stood confused. Kai's status as an alpha already ensured him a legal identity in the human world. He continued, and it clicked in Julie's head. Julie almost smacked herself. Of course he assumed she was asking because she was to marry Khai soon. Julie thought about his moment for a few, ignoring his tightening hold on her arm. So how do ordinary werewolves, she began. From her peripheral view, she caught Kai's gaze and immediately rephrased. How do werewolves who aren't alphas and all that deal with this? She asked, genuinely interested in knowing. An image of Adrian crossed her mind, and she immediately shook it off. She couldn't believe she had been about to marry him. But what if she hadn't found him with Camille? What if he hadn't tried to take her chance of building a family without her permission? What if he had just loved her like she thought? Would they have gotten their hopes up only to be told they cannot get married? She wondered as she waited for his response. They simply don't have to deal with it, he replied. Julie stared at him confused again. The president shared a look with Khai for a very long minute. Khai nodded, and the president cleared his throat before adding, Ordinary, he began, clearing his throat as he met Kai's gaze. I meant werewolves who aren't alphas, or at most of the bloodline, do not exist in the population regulation system of our society. As far as that department is concerned, they do not exist, he explained. Oh, was all Julie could offer. The president nodded. You see, werewolves who come here have to be approved by the authorities or supervision in their world. Once approved, they can only be issued a temporary entry certificate and must regularly report their situation to not only their wolf pack but to the government her as well. Oh, Julie mumbled. Why not tell the human about it, though? Wouldn't that help us take measure so we're not caught unaware because we were ignorant to their absence? Julie asked, fighting the urge to chip in how she herself had been attacked by werewolves. Well, rogues, but same difference. Disclosing the existence of werewolves and other fantasy species to the population is an option we cannot risk, he disclosed, shaking his head. It would scare them. It would wreak havoc that we can avoid, he argued. I know about werewolves, but I'm here. She argued back. You're engaged to their leader. It's different, he retorted, his eyes snapping to Kai's for a moment before turning his gaze back to her. Werewolves are not controlled by human rules, and as cliché as it sounds, we're only human. It is impossible to try to control them based off of our rules, so issuing human identities to them when they do not follow our rules would only serve to bite us later, he explained. Julie absorbed all the information he had been willing to give and had shared with her so far. To say she was surprised was putting it lightly. Who knew the person she would learn so much about werewolves and humans coexisting would be the president himself? One last question. The president perked up at her statement. He looked to Khai again. They did the strange exchange of looks. Khai nodded. Feel free, he said. What if the werewolf's mate is a human? What happens then? She asked. Human most times, if not always, follow the werewolves and return to the wolf pack. He answered. He opened his mouth to say something more, but slammed it shut again. He repeated it before shaking his head. Yes, if you're suddenly wondering about the increasing number of disappearances, then yes, you're correct. That's why there seems to be a lot of disappearances every year. The president's words planted a seed in Julia's heart. Witnessing numerous violent incidents, the world of werewolves felt no different from hell for her. Subconsciously, she covered her abdomen with her hands, making a silent vow. After the contract ended, she was determined to leave and live a normal life away from the world of supernatural beings. The drive home was uncomfortably silent. Julie tapped at her thighs the whole ride home. She could feel Khai's gaze on her, but she forced her head to stay put. The car slowed to a stop, but none stepped out. What is it? Khai asked, releasing a breath as he shut the ignition off. Julie looked at him confused. What is what? She shot back. Khai pinched his forehead like she was the cause of all his worry. You know what I mean, Julie. He forced through gritted teeth. Why are you so quiet? Julie shrugged. First you complain I'm too chatty, now I'm too quiet. Which is it? She dragged. She knew what he was asking, but she wasn't about to tell him she planned to run off with his child immediately. The contract was over. Julie, he warned, his gaze pinning her to her seat. What? She asked, her eyes widening. She reached for the door to get out, only to find it locked. You locked the doors, she asked, her voice trembling slightly. You're only just noticing? He fired back, a brow arched in her direction. Julie glared at him, but he wouldn't budge. She huffed and folded her arms against her chest. If that was how he was going to play it, then two can play. Julie, I swear if you do not speak this minute, he warned. Fine, I was thinking about the whole mate thing is all. She rushed. Khai let out a non-communal noise very similar to a talk before saying, You shouldn't worry about that, Julie. He breathed. We're only contractual mates, he added. I don't get. Contractual mates, there's mates in that, isn't there? She retorted. You know you have such a sharp mouth for someone who know exactly who I am. He snapped. What I am, he added, glaring daggers at her. The urge to shrink in her seat overshadowed Julie, but she straightened her spine. If she was going to deal with him for the next 6 months, the least she could do to make it even the least bit bearable was to stand her ground once in a while. Khai snorted at her attempt at defiling him yet again. There is no bond between contractual mates, he stated. Julie's face immediately lifted at that piece of information. They weren't bonded, and they wouldn't have to be bonded? She almost jumped at the news. Khai shook his head and got down. Julie remained in the car smiling like a Cheshire cat. Deep down, she knew her worries were mostly because of the child. She was going to be loving with the man for 6 months. The child was due to be out in 6 months. Of course she wasn't stupid. She had to make sure the baby was not discovered by Khai, or everything would go to shit before it even began. She looked up to see him still stood in front of the car, waiting for her. She got down and was soon walking side by side with him. Just as he was about to turn the door's handle and she'd her, a thought crossed her mind. But if you've lived so long, how come you haven't met your mate? She asked before her brain could process what she was asking. Khai tensed, the ghost of a smile that had been on his face's thing of the past. He looked more serious than he usually did at work, and even then, he was pretty damn serious. I'm sorry. I did not mean to poke into your private business. I was just wondering. She trailed off, suddenly feeling like kicking herself in the gut for being too nosy. There used to be, but she left. My presence affected her career. He grumbled and pushed the door open, his mood more sour than usual. Julie suddenly felt guilty. Why did she have to ask? She felt the need to comfort him, make him cheer up or as cheered up as he could be. But how? She reached for Khai and began rubbing soothing circles on his back. It was the least she could do. Put away your sympathy. I don't need it, Khai said coldly, moving away from her touch. Even without Luna, I would still be powerful. I would still become the Alpha King. If that's the case, why am I here? Julie asked. Because I have to deal with the elders and other alphas for now. Because the pack is constantly being attacked by rogues. If I at least have a suitable enough drawbacks, they would back off, he replied. Then wouldn't Ada be your best bet? She asked. Khai glared at her, but she shrugged. I mean, she'd the daughter of the alpha of the second largest wolf pack. She began. I did my research, she added when Khai looked at her with suspicion in his eyes. Both your packs are the only packs allowed into the human society and made economic contribution to the wolf packs. It only makes sense. She reasoned. Most packs, from what I've read, are only willing to follow the werewolf world rules and are still aggressive towards humans, and of course, there's rogues too. She ranted off like she was reading from a tabloid, shocking Khai shut. How do you know all these? He asked, genuinely surprised. You'd be shocked how much you can find out when you know what to look out for. She shrugged it off, like she hadn't just ranted a well-kept secret. Khai was yet again amazed at how brilliant she truly was, but kept that finding to himself. He nodded. Ada is indeed more suitable a choice for my Luna. Eventually, he added. But for now, you are still the best candidate, he said, his eyes meeting hers. And why's that? Simple. You're easier to control. Plus, if you decided to lie against me, no one would believe any slander coming from your lips. Ada, on the other hand, he trailed off, the meaning well implied. He considered her weak and malleable. Julie fumed at his reasoning. What had she expected? Him ranting off all her wonderful qualities. She cursed him in her heart as she glared daggers at him. He was just a pompous, ignorant, uncaring, callous prick, and she couldn't wait to be free from whatever she was signing into. Julie snuggled closer into the sheets of her new bed, enjoying her sleep now that she had put Khai's presence behind her. Khai flipped on his side, trying to find a better sleeping position, only to turn just a second later. When are we going to finally meet this special lady, Khai? His mother asked. Soon, mother. Khai dragged, already having enough of hearing the same question asked over and over again. That's all we've been hearing. When is soon? His father's familiar baritone demanded. Is she even real? Khai almost smacked his head. He knew it was just a matter of time before they started doubting her existence. Khai fought the urge to roll his eyes as his mother nodded in agreement. Of course she would. She was way too loyal to the man. I said I would bring her to you both soon, and I would do just that. I just have a lot of more pressing matters on my mind right now. There's the company and the issue with Ad. All of these just sound like excuses and more excuses. His father cut him off. I'd bring her. He forced through gritted teeth, his hands fisted in an attempt to slow his natural reaction to being interrupted. Khai turned in his bed again, shaking the annoying memory from his mind. He had expected his mother to nag him for not bringing Julie earlier, but not his father. Khai turned and looked at the snoring woman beside him. Was he really making the right decision? Should he just go ahead and Ada already? The latter did come with a lot of benefit, and the former more issues than he would like. Something akin to jealousy rose in his chest. She hadn't moved an inch since she closed her eyes. He envied it. He yet again fought the urge to move closer to her just to rile her up and steer her awake. He chuckled silently and forced his eyes shut. He needed to get some sleep. Tomorrow already felt like a hectic day. Julie typed away at her keyboard, her full attention on sorting her mails. Her ears perked up at the sound of Ada's name from Sebastian's lips. Her heart raced not because of the direction Ada was soon headed, but because of the person requesting her presence in his office. She watched as Ada sashayed her way into Khai's office. Their gazes locked, and Ada gave her the most condescending look Julie had ever received. Julie looked away confused. She knew they had bad blood, but that look had been way more than some basic bad blood exchange. Julie shook it off. She was probably overthinking things again. I heard she's been making moves to be the boss's new plaything. A voice not too far from her desk said. Julie lifted her eyes to locate the owner of the voice. She focuses back on her screen when she saw it was only Jennifer, the office gossip since Camille left. The other day I saw her wearing a skirt shorter than my fringe, Patricia whispered. Julie couldn't fight it any longer. Her attention was drawn from her screen and to the conversation going on right in front of her. It's sad to see her try so hard to seduce him. Julie tried zoning out their voices at that. She just couldn't help feeling sad that they could openly degrade their fellow woman like that. The men already did enough of pushing down for an entire street of offices. The women didn't need to join them too. Yeah, if only she bothered to read the rules. Patricia snorted, breaking through Julie's mind shield. She gives me the if arrogant and uncultured was a person vibe, Jennifer stated, wrinkling her nose in disgust. Have you actually seen her rubbing off on the boss, or is this just you assuming what isn't there? Julie found herself saying before she could slam her mouth shut. Both their heads snapped to her, Jennifer's eyes widening in shock that she had actually been loud enough for Julie to hear. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the entire office could hear you, Julie wanted to add, but shut her mouth. Patricia was quicker to recover from the shock of being overheard. Well, she's not exactly not trying to get with the boss and climb her way up now, is she? Patricia rolled her eyes. Well, you aren't either, but do you see me yelling my lungs calling you an office slut? Julie fired back, her brow raised at the gossip. Jennifer gasped, and Patricia opened her mouth to say something, but the words seemed to have died an early death in her throat. That's what I thought. Now, rather than say something you're not sure of about someone you don't even know anything about, why don't you focus on what you're actually getting paid to do? Julie said, her eyes challenging them to utter any more defaming words. They went back to whatever it was they were doing, and Julie nodded and went back to her work, oblivious to the pair of eyes watching her from 2 desks away. Ada watched Julie defend her against the 2 office gossips, and something akin to appreciation crossed her heart. She suddenly considered what she was doing. Did Julie really deserve what she had planned? What would she really gain from harming someone who openly defended her, in her absence, when they could as well have been speaking the truth? She shook her doubts and took her seat, typing away. She stole a final glance at Julie, just in time to see her watching her, a look she couldn't decipher in her eyes. Julie couldn't help feeling a hint of sympathy for Ada. The girl had barely been a week in the office and already had office slut rumors circulating. Just then a clap came from where Khai's office was situated. Multiple heads turned to see what the commotion was about. Julie almost rolled her eyes as her eyes settled on a smirking Khai. He turned away from her, and the unreadable mask was back on. So I'm happy to be here again to let you all know that we've bagged yet another large-scale cooperation project for the company, he announced, all thanks to Ada. He added, and all eyes shifted to the stoic-faced Ada. He locked eyes with Ada and she smiled. They both knew what he was hiding, how he was deliberately leaving out details like how it was actually a cooperation deal with Ada's pack. Cheers erupted, and everyone suddenly tried to act all friendly with Ada. They all knew what that meant for her. Khai cleared his throat and the cheers died down. So seeing as Miss Julie has proven herself so many times in the past, it only makes sense that she's on the team for the one, and since Miss Ada was the one who brought this in, they would work on it together. He announced, and Julie's eyes snapped to his painfully fast. What? She drowned out the cheers and congratulations flying in the air. She ignored the looks of envy, the faces of her co-workers, her mind only about to focus on one thing. This was not going to end well. This only meant trouble for her. She stole a glance at Ada to see her already smirking at her. She paled. Once everyone had settled down, Khai soon went back to his office, and Julie was on his tail. I can't work on this one. She blurted immediately they were in the safety of his office. Sir, she quickly added when he glared at her. So what are you suggesting? Khai dragged like she was a child pestering his sweet piece. I would like to be off the team. Someone else could warn on it with Ada, someone she would have less problems with. Julie offered. No, Khai said, not looking up at her. What? Julie asked incredulously. You heard me. No, please, he gestured towards the door. The earlier you both get on it, the better, he added, picking out files from the pile on his desk. Julie quickly went from shock to anger and stamped out of the office, her path to her desk interpreted by the reason for her anger. I hope while you were in there, you also got the notice that I'm quite difficult to please, and you do have to please me to get this one, right? Ada taunted. Julie considered going berserk on her and giving her a beatdown right there, but she immediately shoved down the thought she'd probably be the one who ended with bruises and open cuts by the end of it all. She forced out a breath, smiled, and nodded. For the next few days, Julie stayed away from Ada as much as she could, only finding her when she needed clarity on anything, which were very few. It was almost impossible, but she dug her nails into her palm whenever Ada would say something disrespectful or meant to get a reaction out of her. One particular day had made her particularly excited. Ada had stormed off angrier than she had walked in. She'd been ranting a list of non-existent mistakes and knew it just as much as Julie that those did not actually exist, and if they did, she had been the one to put them there. Ada had expected some form of tantrum or at the very least an argument to ensue. What she hadn't expected was a calm, "I'm sorry for making such a silly mistake. I do a double check and make the necessary corrections." She almost pulled out her hair when Julie had topped it off with a smile before asking for permission to be excused. She suddenly felt like she was ouching on cotton and not the hard rock she had expected when she had decided to go that route. Julie bit back her smile as she was leaving the office, bursting out into laughter in the safety of the restroom. Ada was going to go crazy by the end of the project, and she washing every bit of her madness. Ada's anger was the heart-shaped froth on her morning coffee. An idea popped into her mind, and she forced her laughter down as she exited the bathroom. She walked to Ada's desk, fighting her smile all the way. She got to the now familiar desk, and Ada raised a brow at her. "What?" she spat, her anger still very high and rising even higher with Julie's presence. "I was thinking we have some fun tonight. I was thinking a bar," Julie suggested, holding back a chuckle. Ada burped, the sound drawing the attention of a few men beside them. Julie chuckled. A loud sound escaped her lip, and Ada laughed and lifted her glass in the air. Julie clicked her own glass against hers as they both chuckled like someone was making jokes right in front of them. "You know, if I knew you would be this fun, I would have invited you for a drink sooner." "You didn't invite me for this one." Julie deadpanned only to burst into laughter the next minute. Her vein buzzed with excitement as the alcohol slipped down her burning throat. Ada laughed. "True," she admitted. "Sorry. She trailed off. Her eyes shot daggers at a man whose eyes had definitely been on her boobs. She gave him the finger and turned to Julie, who chuckled at her. "What?" she asked. "Oh, nothing," Julie snickered. "Spit it out," Ada whined. "Fine. It's nothing really. It's just weird to see you like this." "How?" She rested her jaw on her palm, her lips in a pout. "You know, carefree. It's a different vibe from what I usually get at work. I could get used to it." Julie confessed, her eyes focused on her drink. She twirled it between her fingers and downed its content in one go. "Oh, that," she mumbled and tilted her glass against her lips, the golden fluid causing a hum she was already addicted to. "I'm really not like that, you know," she whispered. "I figured," Julie said. "Why?" she asked. Ada groaned and shoved another glass down her throat. "The typical story. King, or in my case, Alpha, has an only child. Child isn't a boy, so she's pampered all her like a classical princess all her lift, but there's the catch." She hiccuped and burped. "What catch?" Julie asked, confused. Ada grumbled some incoherent words under her breath just before she shoved the drink angrily down her throat. "Hey!" Julie called. She grabbed the glass from Ada's reach before she could shove down another glass. "Give it." Ada slurred and reached for the glass. Julie pulled it out of her reach. "No more for you for now," she scolded. Ada glared at her for a long minute before she looked away. "Fine," she huffed. "You were saying?" She arched a brow at her. "Oh yeah, just the usual." She turned back in her seat to face Julie. "It was just the typical you have to get married, or in my case, mated to someone to assume my birthright." She spat. the anger oozing off of her as she reached for her glass, her hands shaky. "Tell me you're kidding," Julie burped. I what wish?" she slurred. "Why do you know I'm going through all of this? Remember the dinner date I had with Khai?" Julie forced the anger that flooded her veins down as the memory of Ada's hand over Khai's invaded her mind. "Yeah, I remember. What about it?" she mumbled over the rim of her glass. "It was because I couldn't find a mate after the shifting. My father thought it would be a great idea to force me to marry Khai, hence the date." She shrugged, but her shoulders were anything but relaxed. She was angry, and Julie knew it. "You know, I was actually prepared for it." Spoke affirmation. Bullshit to myself in the mirror and everything. She laughed to herself. "I wouldn't say everything was going well, but I would say they were going as okay as someone like Khai could. I was happy, of course. I mean, I was against the whole thing, but immediately I saw him in person. I wanted him." She confessed, her eyes distant. Julie squeezed her glass to stop from smacking her with it. She knew she was going to regret telling her that by morning, but she said it nonetheless. She felt something for Khai. An alpha of a major wolf pack was in support of Ada's marriage to Khai. What did she have? So that was two things I couldn't really say no to. Ada continued, and Julie startled, having forgotten Ada was with her. "I wanted him, and I needed him to please my father." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I was content with how that date was going, only to have even that snatched from me too," she snapped, "by you." She turned and pinned Julie with a glare. "You both humiliated me. Who goes from having a date with me to leaving off with a fiancé?" She screamed. A few heads turned their way. Ada turned her glare their way, and they looked away. "I refuse to be treated that way. I'm just going to have to prove I'm better than you, and that should be easy enough. Frame you, and boom, Khai would be mine, and my father would be proud of me. Happy ending." She giggled. Julie's first instinct had been to snap at her. The girl just threatened to mess what she wasn't even sure she had yet with Khai. She gulped her drink. She looked at Ada. It was difficult to feel anything but pity for the girl. All she wanted was love and her birthright, but she's been robbed of both. She rubbed at her shoulders, leaving soothing circles. "That's so unfair." She admitted. The sun filtered through the openings in her curtains as yet another beep rang from her phone. Julie groaned as she flipped to her side to grab the annoying device. She rubbed at her eyes when Ada's name popped up again. She threw the device on her bed. She checked the old granny clock by her door, groaned again when she saw it was barely past 6 in the morning. Her head ached from drinking so much alcohol the previous night. Julie slipped her drawers open and grabbed the life-saving bottle of pills. She popped an aspirin and slipped her feet from under the sheets. Her face scrunched up as she read the content of Ada's rain of messages. They all said the same thing, just with different wordings and timestamps. She could go to Ada's company before work to deal with the cooperation, or in her words, get the show on the road. Classic. Julie managed a smile as she got up, stretched her aching limbs, and began her morning routine. She was excited. Ada finally decided to stop torturing her. She only wished she didn't have to wake her up so early. As always, she's ready in about an hour, and tossed her bag in the back of her trusty Audi. The road was thankfully clear as she headed to the outskirts of town. She checked the address for the umpteenth time since Ada had woken her up with her barrage of messages. It was so unusual that she would choose such a remote area for her company, seeing as Khai had done the exact opposite and dumped his company right in the center of it all, downtown. She turned off the radio as the air shifted, from the busy buzz of the morning rush in the city to the uncomfortable silence in the outskirt areas. Her eyes flipped from left to right more than a couple times as she drove deeper into unfamiliar territory. The houses all looked worn in and in need of a reconstruction. Most either spotted broken doors, missing windows, torn nests, or more than a few wall scrapings. Her gaze caught a man's, not because she was looking, but because he had been looking at her. His crooked teeth came into view as he smiled at her from his spot on the floor beside an empty bin. Julie pushed on the accelerator and floored it till she came to a towering building. The all-glass skyscraper stuck out like a sore thumb amidst the old flats, bungalows, and other residential buildings. Julie rolled the car into the company's parking lot. Silence creeped up on her as she shut the engine. Her hands hovered over the steering wheel. She contemplated making a U-turn back home. No, she had already come this far, so she might as well, she thought. She grabbed her signature bag and made sure all locks were in place before she stepped away from her car and into the glistening building. Immediately her legs crossed the doorway. All heads turned to her. Julie dug her nails into her palm, forced her head to stay high, and crossed the long aisle to the elevator. She breathed in relief the moment she was safely without the four walls of the elevator. The ride to the top floor was claiming to say the least. She straightened her black skirt, neatened the collar of her lilac button-down, and as soon as the ding rang out, she stepped out into the administrative floor of the building. Julie's spine straightened as her eyes assessed the crowd. Few had their heads buried in work. Most had their eyes on her. What unsettled her wasn't the fact that they all seemed to be trying to have a peek at her soul, but rather the fact that they all looked at her like a predator would its prey. The air was different. She felt like she was walking into a den of lions and not a standard company office. Her neck snapped to the side as a growl broke the silence. It couldn't be. She quickened her pace till she was at the office directly across the elevator, Ada's office. She suddenly felt grateful that Ada had bombarded her with texts earlier telling her exactly where her office was. She couldn't even picture herself having to ask those people for directions. Yes, Ada did cover every bit of information in her texts, but she seemed to have left out a very vital part. Her staff were all werewolves. Ada opened the door with a smile and ushered Julie in. Julie released her palm and let out a breath as Ada shut the door behind them. "Why?" she blurted. "Why what?" Ada arched a brow at her. "Your staff. They're all werewolves," she whisper-yelled, her voice cracked at the end. Ada laughed like she had said the funniest joke, and Julie glared at her. "I just believe in balance." Ada shrugged, reassumed her seat. "Don't worry, they're all well-educated and highly qualified," she assured. "I send werewolves from my pack to study in the human society, and after graduation, they return to work here for me. It's a win-win." Ada lifted a finger when Julie opened her mouth to comment, and whispered a sorry, and gestured for Julie to take the seat across from her. She picked the landline and told whoever it was to come in. A man soon came in with the folders under one arm and a tray of coffee on the other. His eyes fell on Julie and their eyes locked. He knew she was odd. He didn't comment on it and instead dropped both the tray and the file, nodded graciously at Ada, and left. "Okay, let's not waste any more time. I already signed here." She pointed at a neatly scrawled signature. "You sign here." She pointed at an empty space beside it. "You can read through if you'd like before you sign." Julie nodded, did a quick scan and signed. Weird as it felt, she trusted Ada, despite how rocky their meeting had been. They both headed for the office, Khai's office soon after, and went their separate ways. Hours went by and not a peep of Julie's visit was mentioned. Julie huffed and dumped her back against the swivel chair once she sent the last of her reports for the day. She smiled as Ada approached her, a grin stretched across her lips. "Come on, you look like you've been run over by a truck. Let's go out some food in you." She grabbed Julie by the arm, earning them a few weird looks from those around. Julie chuckled. "I can walk on my own." She moved to pull her arm free, but Ada's grip was way too tight. The smell of roasted meat, spices, heated veggies, and the hum of whispers filled the air as they walked into the restaurant. Julie felt out of place in her plain skirt and button-up stained with sweat from the day. She looked at Ada worried, but the girl just smiled and pulled at her arm. "You're with me, relax," she reassured. It was a matter of minutes before a tray filled with different assortments of meats and rare dishes was dropped on their secluded table. Julie couldn't help but appreciate Ada's thoughtfulness as she ate, no longer bothered people were looking their way because Ada had gotten them a table far from the crowd. Julie savored every dish. The steak was her favorite. It had a great umami taste that left her craving more. She slammed her hand against her lips as a wave of nausea invaded her senses. She rushed out of the restaurant and out into the open, Ada on her tail. Julie almost cried as she wasted yet another amazing meal on the floor. She held her stomach as she hunched over, heaving up the food she had not even had the time to digest. Ada watched Julie puke her guts out. Her eyes widened in realization as memories of her stepmother's pregnancy and her young son crossed her mind. She held back Julie's hair as she let it all out. Julie rose to her full height, and Ada handed her a napkin. She took it thankfully and wiped her mouth clean. "Are you pregnant?" she asked. Julie's eyes widened, realizing what just happened. She considered lying. Ada had been nice to her recently. Yes, but she still had feelings for Khai. Is it Khai's? What if she told Ada and she went to Khai? That would be the end of her master plan. Yes, she muttered. Ada had spilled her entire life to her just the previous night. She had trusted her with her thoughts and feelings. The least she could do was give her the benefit of the doubt. "Can you?" she began, but her voice broke. "Can you keep it between us?" she pleaded. Ada looked at her, her eyes thoughtful. She didn't know why she even contemplated it, but she found herself saying, "Yes." Julie had defended her not once, but twice, in her absence. She was convinced she had to be different from other human beings. She would make an amazing friend. "But I think you should know, Khai is very possessive, and I mean very possessive," she said, a serious look in her eyes. "If you're going to lie to him, you should be prepared for the consequences." "Wouldn't be pretty," she warned. "Thanks," Julie nodded. They headed back in. Julie grabbed Ada's hand just before she pushed the door open. "I do have a favor I'd like to ask." Ada turned to her. "Sure, what's up?" "Do you have anything that I could use to hide the smell of puppies?" Ada smiled. "I have just the thing," she said before she moved away to make a call. She returned less than a minute later. "Would have someone send 2 herbal mixes to you tomorrow, one for the pup's growth and the other to hide the smell." She grinned at her. "But this is only temporary." "How temporary?" 3 months at most. After that, you'd have to run or tell the truth," she said, all signs of a smile gone. Julie's shoulder dropped as the words left her lips. What was she going to do? How was she going to hide a pregnancy from a man she just signed a 6-month contract with? Ada led them back to their seats, but she couldn't stop her mind from reeling. Julie threw the black pill down her throat and gulped some water. She was already late for work, for the 3rd time that week. She grabbed her bag and locked the door, quickly gripping the handle as a wave of dizziness hit her. She winced as she grabbed at her head, vision blurred, causing her to shut her eyes. Just like the past dozen times since she started taking the growth and baby hiding pills, she waited a few seconds for it to pass. Once certain she could move more than 2 steps without dropping, she released the handle and got into her car. The drive to work wasn't any different from the past few days either. It was a mix of headaches, unexplained exhaustion, even though all she did was sit and steer, and flickering vision blur. Julie felt horrible as she got down from the elevator and headed to her seat. She got strange looks as she fought the urge to lean against the demarcating woods of the desks. Ada rushed to her side the moment she got to her desk. "What's wrong?" she rushed, a worried look in her eyes. "I'm fine." Julie muttered. She winced and dumped herself on her seat as yet another wave of weakness hit. Ada frowned. "No, you're not. What's going on?" She crouched beside her seat. Julie grabbed her head. "I don't know. I've just been feeling really tired lately, even without doing anything," she explained. Ada watched her, hating how pale she looked. "When did this start?" Julie thought about it for a bit. "Since I started taking the pills," she said, unsure. Ada's eyes widened. A part of her hoped it was just pure coincidence and had nothing to do with her sudden weakness. "Have you eaten?" She rubbed soothing circles on her back. Julie shook her head in the negative and instantly regretted it. She grabbed her head as pain shot through her. "No." She winced. "Shit, you look horrible," she grimaced. "I'd send you some food." She typed furiously at her phone. She looked at her apologetically. "Would have joined you, but I have to make a quick stop." Julie nodded, just grateful that she wouldn't have to go down for lunch. With the way she felt, she doubted she would make it more than 3 steps before she dropped. Ada smiled at her. She returned it and wondered how anyone could possibly hate Ada. She was really not bad once she opened up. Ada rose to her full height and walked away, her mind unsettled. She only hoped she hadn't somehow complicated things. She got in her car and drove distractedly all the way to the pack house on the other side of town. She beat traffic, but that was the least of her worries. She tapped away at her steering wheel, pleading to everything that nothing permanent was going on with Julie. The pack house was mostly empty, thankfully. It was nothing different from a standard house, just larger. She nodded to the wolves that bowed on her way to the pack doctor. The smell of spices, herbs, and leaves invaded her nostrils as she stepped through the door into the pack doctor's room. She followed the sound of pounding and smiled when she saw Dr. Sam skillfully crushing some herbs which smelled awfully like rosemary. "It's great to see you. How's the baby?" She smiled at Ada's stomach. Ada's eyes widened. "No, it wasn't for me." She waved furiously. "Oh?" Dr. Sam paused her pounding and gestured for her to take a seat. "Yeah." Ada took a seat on a wooden stool beside a shelf of what looked like animal parts. "That's actually why I'm here." "Oh, hope there's no issues?" Her brows furrowed. "Actually." Ada scratched the back of her neck. She couldn't exactly tell the doctor who it was for, but she needed to be as specific as possible if she was to get anything from Dr. Sam. "I was wondering if either of the pills had any side effects?" Dr. Sam looked at her thoughtfully. She arched a brow at her. "Is this person experiencing any side effect?" she asked and took the seat opposite her. "Headaches, but mostly weakness." Dr. Sam, accessing eyes, turned worried as she looked at Ada. "Is this person a human?" Her voice confirming Ada's worries. "What if they are?" she asked, fixing the panic out of her voice. "Humans can't take those medicines. Usually werewolves do not experience side effects, but humans—" She trailed off. A non-committal sound escaped her gritted teeth. Ada thanked her and left the room feeling worse than when she had come. She drove even faster back to work and released a breath when she saw Julie still seated. She grinned as she watched her munch on the meal she had sent up. It was always like Julie started in a movie of her own when she ate, uncaring whether she was being watched or not. She remembered why she had to send up food, and her smile dropped. "You have to stop taking those pills," she blurted. Julie raised her head from her meal, the chicken lap still caught between her teeth. "Oh, why?" she mumbled through it. "I can't go into details now, but just stop them, okay?" Julie shrugged. "Okay." Ada nodded and left. "The boss would like to see you." Ada turned to see a blonde lady dressed neatly in a white button-down and a plaid skirt. Ada nodded and headed to Khai's office, ignoring the strange looks she got on her way. She shut the door behind her, apprehensive. Khai didn't usually call her into his office. She was usually the one to barge in, so she wondered what warranted it. Her worry grew as she focused on a pacing Khai. "Why does Julie look like she's going to drop any second?" Khai demanded, his eyes hard as they settled on her. "I don't understand." "How would I know?" "Ada," he warned. Ada shrunk back into the door, but she stood her ground. She made a promise to Julie, and she intended to keep it. She wasn't going to go blabbing to Khai, even if he had her in a chokehold and threatened her. "I do not know." She forced through gritted teeth, breaking every syllable so it got through his thick skull. "I swear, if you do anything to hurt her." The fire in his eyes threatened to burn her. "You do not tell me what to do. No one does." She sneered and stormed out of the office and his company before he could retaliate. Ada felt bad that Julie had to be tied to such a man. She didn't deserve to be married to someone that controlling, whether contractual or not. Julie stretched in her seat. She had slept almost through the entire morning. Her eyes slammed shut as pain slammed into her. She gripped her stomach in a vice-like grip. She slammed her lips shut to keep from screaming out as pain spread through her abdomen. The feeling of impending doom crossed her heart as it got worse, causing her to grit her teeth in pain. She knew it wasn't protocol, it wasn't the right thing to do, but she scribbled on a plain paper and handed it to Sebastian. "Please help me hand this to the supervisor." She rushed and ran all the way to the elevator. She cried out in pain as the contraption rode downwards. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and sweat broke out on her temple as she heaved in pain. The elevator dinged, and she forced herself to her feet and struggled out till she was safely in her car. She held her stomach as she drove home, the pain only worsening as she moved farther from the office. She considered dropping off at the hospital, but shoved the thought. She hadn't been to any antenatal appointments for one reason and one reason alone. She couldn't afford for the doctors to perform an examination and find out her child was some type of monster. Her only option was home. She'd just take a nap, drink some water, and she was sure she would feel better by the time she woke up. She shut off the ignition and dragged her feet through the door. She blew out a breath as she shut the door behind her. She winced and forced her way to the kitchen. She tilted the bottle of water, emptying its content into a glass. She tipped the glass back and screamed when a sharp, jarring pain shot through her. She fell to the ground, her sight clouded by darkness, and her head met the floor. Julie winced as she pulled herself up with the aid of the counter. She screeched. Her back hit the edge of the counter as her eyes settled on Khai in her house, holding her medicine with a gloomy look on his face. "How long have you been pregnant?" Julie stared at him in shock. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "How long, Julie?" he growled. Julie shrieked and shrunk back, away from Khai. I. She stuttered. Her body shook in fear as his glare intensified, his feet slowly closing the distance between them. He dragged a hand painfully slow through his hair. "Where did you get this?" He shoved the bottle in her face. The bottle of brown pills shook with the force. "Why do you have a werewolf pup growth potion in your possession, Julie?" He roared. The veins on his neck scared Julie into the counter. Julie's eyes snapped to the bottle. Her eyes searched both his hands from the second potion. Relief washed through her when she came up empty. Her relief was short-lived. Khai closed the distance in 2 steps, his angry face so close to her that she could feel his breath on her cheeks. Her eyes snapped to his eyes, only to look back at the floor. He stared at her expectantly, but she didn't dare answer. How was she supposed to tell him that she was weeks pregnant with his child, but didn't tell him? What was her forgivable reason for keeping a father from his child? Something changed in his eyes. He went from angry and demanding to withdraw. His lips curled in disgust. "Have you been speaking with Adrian?" He spat, the fury in his eyes unlike before. It was quiet, more threatening, held more promises of a suitable punishment if she didn't start talking. "Where have you been meeting with him?" he yelled, slamming her arm against the counter. Julie winced in pain as he tilted her arm at a weird angle. "Where is he?" He yelled too close to her ear. Julie turned the other way. Her ears begged for relief. Julie's body trembled the louder his demands got. What could she possibly tell him asides the truth? He already had one of the potions with him. It didn't take a genius to piece 2 and 2 together, and worse, Khai for some absurd reason thought she had been in contact with the very reason she couldn't believe she was pregnant till it was hard to ignore, Adrian. There was no way she could successfully hide the pregnancy either way. "I'm pregnant. I've been for a while now." She breathed. "Here goes nothing. It's Adrian's." She whispered, but by this tense his body became, she knew he had heard her, loud and clear. "I didn't want to say anything about it because of obvious reasons." She muttered, her head turned away from him as the lie slipped easily from her lips. She forced her shaky fingers still, forced her breathing to come out as anything but pants. She prayed that the potion was still in effect and he couldn't smell his pup. Khai watched her. He sniffed the air, doubtful. Julie counted the seconds until Khai pushed off of her. He shoved the potion in his pants pocket and nodded. "How'd you get it?" he asked again, but his voice was much calmer, too calm. Julie pushed off the counter, took a breath for the first time since she opened her eyes. She watched him for a few minutes. He didn't look angry anymore. "I asked Ada for help, and she had it sent to me," she finally admitted. "It was only because I didn't think it would be possible for me to carry an actual werewolf puppy." She waved furiously. His lips curled again, his hands balled into fist. Julie shifted backwards as his body trembled with anger. He forced his eyes shut and pushed out huffs of air. In and out, he chanted in his head. "Why would you not tell me about something of this magnitude?" he demanded through gritted teeth. Julie could tell he was trying to control his anger, but it didn't stop her body from trembling. "There was no need for you to know. It isn't yours, so what's the point?" Julie shrugged, her eyes focused on everywhere but him. Khai's eyes flared as the words left her lips. Yes, he knew the child wasn't his. He couldn't get any woman or wolf pregnant. It was the very reason his former mate had left him, but she didn't have to throw it in his face that way. Well, whether the child was mine or not, I deserve to know. I wouldn't have signed a freaking contract with you if I knew you were pregnant with another man's child. He clipped. The urge to return her gracious jab almost blinding. What? She stuttered. He didn't mean that, right? Of all the reactions she had expected, his acceptance of a child that wasn't his, a child that belonged to a rogue, was the least. I would raise the child as mine, he shrugged. Julie stood stunned. Had she expected him to give up on her completely? Yes. Had she expected he would hunt Adrian down and show his strength? Yes. But had she expected he would so easily accept the child of a man he was haunting down? Definitely no. Her heart raced as he moved closer to her. She looked into his eyes, saw the resolve there, and just knew she had to find some way to leave him, to save her child from whatever possessiveness Ada spoke of, to save herself from being condemned to a life in the werewolf world without her say. She watched him lean against the wall, a satisfied look on his face, and she was certain she needed to run away. It's been 2 weeks since Julie stopped the pills. She stretched, finally feeling like herself for the first time in a long time. Good to see you're awake. Julie jumped at the sound of Khai's voice. Good morning. She yawned. He pushed from the wall, ready for your lesson. Julie groaned. Every day since he found out about the baby, Khai had made his sole purpose to teach her everything there was to know about the rules of the wolf pack. You can grumble all you want, but you'd thank me later when you're in the presence of the Alpha and Luna. If you say so. She grumbled and pushed back the sheets. Khai chuckled, let her settle down, and began the lecture. Julie nodded in time as he spoke at length on the hierarchy in his pack, what that meant in other packs, and how the need for an heir is indisputable in every pack. Great, now recap so we're sure you can survive the preparations before the ceremony. Julie rolled her eyes but did as he asked. She couldn't control the smile that graced her face as he nodded in approval. Good. Now get dressed. We have a busy day ahead. He pushed off the wall and left her in the room. Julie blew a breath and began her hurried preparation. She didn't quite know how to feel about the whole thing. On the one hand, she was ecstatic she would finally get to actually see what Khai had tapped about nonstop for 2 weeks. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was only sinking herself deeper into his world, the exact opposite of what she should be doing. She shrugged it off. There was only one way to truly find out what was going to become of her life anyways. She neatly folded her outfit for the day, a simple black sundress and a pair of brown gladiator sandals. She released a breath. Her shoulders sagged as the water hit her back, washing with it drop of water, the dirt and the stress from the past few days. She jolted as a knock came at the door. She hurriedly rinsed off the foam and wrapped a towel around her. I'm almost done, she called. We have to leave early, be quick, came his reply. Just give me 5 minutes. She waited for his retreating steps to fade. She hurriedly dried herself and threw on her outfit for the day. Khai already stood by the door away by the time she stepped out. All right, let's go. Khai stepped aside for her to walk ahead and followed afterwards. The car shook as he got in and slammed the door closed. Julie looked out the window as they exited his compound. Her mind ran 100 miles a minute. She had no idea what she was to expect. Julie is pregnant, he blurted, and it's mine. The Alpha and Luna gasped simultaneously. Luna's eyes widened. She shared a look with the Alpha with a smile so wide, Julie moved closer to Khai, then said, How far along are you? She directed at Julie. About a month. Julie whispered, suddenly doubting her coming. She wanted to squeeze Khai's hand till the bones in it broke. It wasn't his place to tell anyone about her child. Fine, they were his parents, but still, it was her secret to tell, not his. So much for keeping the child safe and away. Oh my, why didn't you start with that? Luna exclaimed and rushed to her side. Has he been feeding you well? What's the pain like on a scale of 1 to 10? Are you feeling okay today? She fused, turned her face left, then right, then between her hands. Her eyes scanned her whole body, checking for scars or any signs of worry. How often do you eat? Hope you've been taking a lot of meat. The baby does need lots of it to grow." She looked at Julie expectantly. Julie opened her mouth to speak but was too shocked to say anything coherent. "Quickly, Andrew," he called to a man stood at attention. The man, Andrew, immediately stood at alert, quickly rushed to the Alpha's feet. "Get the pack doctor here now," he ordered. Andrew nodded and left. The Luna looked to Khai, her eyes shone with joy. "She is being pampered properly, right?" she asked. Khai grabbed his mother's shoulders and shook her. "Calm down. Breathe," he whispered, a smile on his face, a proud one. "She's absolutely fine. The pup is fine too. She's been going for checkups and everything, so relax." His mother's shoulders sagged at the information. "I'm so glad to hear that." She smiled at Julie, a sheepish smile, and reassumed her place next to the Alpha. The pack doctor, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile, walked into the room. "Still, just to be sure." Khai's father gestured for her to attend to Julie. She nodded. "Please take a seat," she suggested, her tone soothing and motherly. Khai loosened his hold on her waist and her heart raced as she approached the lady. What if she foiled something wrong with the baby? What if those pills had not only tried to hurt her but actually succeeded in harming the child too? Julie slowly walked to the doctor, her body rigid with fear and worry. The doctor sent her a kind, encouraging smile and gestured for her to come with her. She led her to an adjoining room. It reeked of wine and freshly prepared food, but as Julie looked around, she saw none of it. Her stomach rumbled at the thought of a good meal. Maybe spending time in the pack house wouldn't be such a horrible idea after all. The doctor gestured for her to lay on the only bed in the room, just by a single window. Julie did as she was told. She tilted when she was asked to, lifted her jaw when it was requested of her, turned to her side when the doctor asked, opened her mouth when the strange request was made. Everything. After a few minutes of weird positioning, shinning a ray of light on her stomach, and a few question-and-answer session, the doctor smiled at her and said, "You're perfectly fine. The baby is too. You've been doing a great job." Julie couldn't control the smile that slipped from her lips. All the while, she would have sworn they were going to find something that would point out just how ignorant she was when it came to raising a werewolf pup, or worse, tell her it could not be resolved, and she would just have to have that on her conscience. Relief washed over her as she left the room, and they both returned to the living room where the Alpha, Luna, and Khai still sat waiting. "The fetus is in perfect form. I'm impressed considering." The doctor formed them, but trailed off. Julie, however, got the message. Considering the fact that she was human, it would be very easy to fuck shit up. She knew that. She actually thought she had. She couldn't even be angry at what that implied as regards how they saw her kind. She was just too relieved to not be the source of harm to her unborn child. "Thank you, Lana. You may go." Khai's father nodded in appreciation. Lana thanked him, bowed and left. "We should celebrate." The Luna's hands snapped together. Something big, something loud, a proper marking ceremony fit for such a news. We could invite people in alliance with gamma levels and above to participate. It would be a great way to break the news. She beamed. "But Julie needs to get some rest first," Khai told her. Julie released a breath, relieved. His hand remained on her waist as he led her into a different room. "You shouldn't have done that. I'm barely okay with you knowing, and now your parents do too. And worse, they think this child is yours." Julie blurted the moment they were in the safety of the closed room. Khai's eyes flared. He hated that she had indirectly admitted to her plans to keep the child a secret from him. "First, you would watch that tone when speaking to me," he warned, his voice dropped an octave lower. "And yes, I agree. It wasn't exactly my secret to tell," he admitted and rolled his eyes when Julie's jaw dropped in exaggerated shock. "What?" he snapped. Did you?" She stuttered. The shock of hearing him admit she was right kept her still, and her brain uncooperative with her voice box. "I can acknowledge when I step out of line?" He shrugged and looked at her strange, like she was the one who just went against his usual line of response. "Anyways, I had to," he told her. "If I didn't, she would keep judging your every little move." His face scrunched up like he was the one who was going to be critiqued, not his contract wife-to-be. Julie opened her mouth and closed it, only to open it again and repeat. She suddenly felt grateful he had. but she just wished he had used something else, not her unborn child. "You could have used something else," she whispered. "Nothing could have been as effective. You saw her, trust me. I couldn't found out about this at a better time." He tucked in, the last exposed section of the bedsheet. "Now, come on, you need to seat." He gestured for her to come to him. Julie looked from the bed to his face and back. His body was as rigid as a pole, but he smiled at her, not the mischievous smile or his usual smirk, an actual smile. It disarmed her. She let out a breath, resigned. "Can I have a moment to rest? Alone?" she asked. She was too tired to think about what he should and shouldn't have done, or what the Luna would have thought of her if Khai hadn't announced her pregnancy, or what she did think about her after finding out. Khai nodded and moved aside. "Sure, you need it. We have a lot of work ahead of us." He smiled that disarming smile again, and Julie could swear she'd get her stomach do a flip. Probably the pup responding to his father. She laid down on the bed, exhausted and glad she could finally sleep, even if it would only be for a little while. She had so many questions she wanted to ask him, so many things she wanted to cry out about, but she was going to deal with that after she had had proper rest. She was going to worry about those problems when they do present themselves. For now, she was just going to get some needed rest. She tucked the edge of the sheets beneath her, yawned and stretched, her bones cracked enjoyably with the motion. She laid her head to sleep and almost screamed when her eyes fell on a half-naked Khai. "What are you doing?" she yelled, slammed the sheets over her eyes, her cheeks and neck a bright shade of red. A deep chuckle escaped his lips very close to her. She was tempted to, but didn't dare peek from under the sheets, not when the man was shirtless and unbuckling his belt. "Oh, come on, don't be shy now. I mean, you're already pregnant for me," he teased, ignoring the cut he felt from realizing the child wasn't in fact his. "Put a freaking shirt on," she yelled from beneath the sheets. "No," she heard, again way too close to her, closer than the first time. The bed dipped as he heart pumped faster. She could feel the heat radiating off of his body and swallowed hard. Light streamed in as the sheets were peeled from her tight grip. "Come on now, no need to hide. I mean, it's nothing you haven't seen before." The sheets ruffled as he shrugged, still very much shirtless. Julie lost the fight. Her eyes roamed his chest, his very tempting chest. She could swear a muscle jumped as her eyes met his. He smiled and said, "You might have to get used to this because we'd have to sleep together for a while." "What? Why?" she spilled. Her eyes dipped to his arms as the flexed as he dropped the sheet. His hand played absently with her legs, tracing circles that did nothing but send pure heat down her spine. "My parents wouldn't believe our relationship is real so easily. We did just spring it out of the blue." He pushed the sheets higher, exposing more skin. His hands soon trailed it. They would probably be guarding the door now, or at the very least, have it guarded. She released a satisfactory breath as she rolled off of him, exhausted. So much for getting some rest, she thought. If that doesn't convince them that this make-believe is real, nothing else will. Julie gasped, her breath came out as pants. She wasn't going to let herself think about what just happened. Khai chuckled and pulled her close, but didn't say anything. She looked up at him, admired the calm fluttering of his eyelids, his lashes leaving a trace with every sweep against his face. "What?" she pushed, leaning into his touch. "Oh, nothing," he replied. Her body vibrated as he yet again gave that deep rumble that meant he found something funny. Julie glared at him. "What's so funny?" she demanded. He looked down at her. The smile still played on his lips as he said, "Oh, nothing. Just, my parents already left like half an hour ago." Julie's eyes widened into saucer before they became slit, like as she pinned him with a glare. "Why didn't you say anything?" she screeched. "And stop such a wonderful experience?" He arched a brow. "I mean, watching you ride me like a freaking horse while you scream my name was something I couldn't interrupt even if I had to." He smirked. Julie pulled her hair down, hiding her red-stained cheeks and neck. She smacked him. "Don't say stuffs like that," she reprimanded. "What? It's only the truth." He shrugged. Julie rolled her eyes but leaned into his hold still. He didn't say anything after that or try to tease her, just caressed her hair like it was natural. Julie released a breath, calm and at peace. Her mind threatened to interrupt with thoughts of what she needed to get done for her elopement to be a success. But for that moment, she was going to enjoy his attention, his touch, the delicate way he ran his fingers through her hair as he shut his eyes. She looked up to admire the man she had just had sex with. The title left a bitter taste on her tongue, but it was the truth. They just had sex, not made love or anything romantic like she would have wanted, but sex, amazing sex. She blushed as images from few minutes ago invaded her thoughts. She shoved them down and wrapped her hand around his waist. She was going to enjoy it for now. "Good morning, Julie." Julie looked up to see the middle-aged woman approach her, the similarities too striking to miss. "Great to see you're awake," she smiled. "Good morning, Luna." She yawned, fighting the urge to run at her eyes. "Oh, stop it. Call me Ciara," she corrected. Julie smiled at her. She knew there was no way she would address her by her actual name. It was an unspoken human wolf rule. She looked around, her eyes searching. "Oh, Khai stepped out for a bit," Julie informed. Ciara smiled sheepishly as if she'd just been caught snooping. "Great, now he cannot disagree." She beamed. Julie shrunk back, apprehensive. "Disagree with what?" she asked. "I want to take you to see the wolf pack tonight. If you're going to be one of us, you need to know your way around." She grinned. Julie couldn't decide if she was excited the Luna was suddenly welcoming or if she should be scared that she was. "Sure," she whispered. "Great," she clapped. "Now go take a shower so it ain't too dark before we can leave." Julie's head snapped to the window. Her eyes widened in shock as she saw how dark it was outside. How long had she slept? She smiled and nodded at Ciara and tossed the sheets aside and away from her body. Ciara left after taking a final sweep of the room. Julie yawned and stretched her aching muscles. The shower was just few steps away, so it wasn't too much of a hassle to get to it. The water tingled against her skin as she ran her hands through her hair. She felt so at peace, it was strange. She had half expected the pack house to be filled and crackling with war or rage or some form of animosity or animalistic, but it was a stark contrast. Everyone seemed welcoming. She was being treated like a princess, and now her mother-in-law to be planned to give her a tour. Julie fought the smirk that threatened to break out. And why shouldn't I appreciate the beauty of life? She threw, her eyes still focused on a bronze man. The shirt rolled off his shoulders, the muscles contracted and relaxed as he tossed it aside. She could feel the heat of his gaze on her even before she turned to see him. His lips curled in rage as he glared at her. "Take that back," he ordered. Julie looked back at him, held his gaze and smiled when the fire behind his eyes burned brighter. "And if I don't?" she teased, closing the distance. "Don't test me, Julie." Her name slipped from his lips like a melody played on a harp. She blinked once, twice. A loud bang came from her right, and she snapped back into her senses. The man from earlier rushed to a younger-looking man. He groaned as the bronze man lifted him from beneath the rolling spikes. She winced as he mistakenly grabbed onto his sides, gathering a palmful of crimson red with it. That must have hurt. She shrugged. "It's just a question." Her eyes met his again, and she moved closer. Her mind told her run, but her body told her to pull in. "Why don't you want me looking at other men, Khai?" she whispered. Her eyes flickered to Khai to see he was already looking at her. She shuffled on her feet, suddenly clueless as to what to expect. She always seemed to be that way when he was near. She looked away, suddenly feeling shy. Her eyes caught Ciara's. The middle-aged woman smiled at her, a warm smile, so unlike what she had been willing to give the first time Julie was introduced. Luna watched them from the distance, her heart finally at peace after so long. She couldn't help but feel warmth spread over her as she watched Khai interact with Julie. He was smiling again, a proper smile, one that touched his eyes. It felt like ages since she'd last seen him so carefree with someone, not since his ex-mate. Julie squinted her eyes. The sun made it almost impossible to keep her eyes open and on her. "Because I said so," Khai snapped. Julie's attention returned to Khai just in time to see him storm off, her curiosity as to why Luna watched them long forgotten. Her heart fell as he created even more distance between them without so much as a peek backwards. She hated that she had started to enjoy teasing him, but hated him more for walking away. He gets like that sometimes. Julie jumped at the voice behind her. Her shoulders sagged as Luna's face came into view, a motherly smile on her face. It warmed her heart, but Julie couldn't fight the nagging behind her because it was a major switch. It would take some getting used to actually not see her as the Luna and rather as her mother-in-law. Her face scrunched up as she asked, "Like how?" "Protective, possessive. Don't worry." Ciara's eyes wrinkled at the sides as she brushed through her hair. "It only means he likes you." She grinned. She wrapped her arm around Julie's. "Now, come on, you need to rest. You have a long day tomorrow." Julie's head snapped to her. "I do?" She arched a brow, confused. "Of course. You'd be accompanying me again," she smiled. "Your Luna lesson starts tomorrow." Luna led them across the training ground. Her feet already knew the way to the house even without looking. "Oh," Julie muttered, unsure. She loves what she had seen so far. She loved how much she had learnt from spending time with Ciara. But she couldn't shake the feeling that it was just a matter of time before whatever Ciara saw in her wore off, and she went back to the woman that was adamant on her being inadequate for Khai and for the Luna title that came with it. Ciara pushed the door to her shared room with Khai, and she's immediately hit with Khai's signature scent, a mix of wood, something fruity, and a hint of dark and warm. It was unlike any mix of cologne she thought she'd find so addictive. "All right, I'd set you free now. You should get some rest." Ciara hugged her, took a final head-to-toe look at her, and left, shutting the door behind her. Julie released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She peeled off her clothes, too tired to even think of a shower, and hopped on the very soft bed. Her eyes soon drifted close, the exhaustion overwhelming. "Now Aaliyah may seem strict initially, but trust me, she gets friendlier, especially if you pay attention to her instruction." She tossed a glance in her direction. "She'd love you." She smiled. The door creaked open, painfully slow against the force from Ciara's palm. The room was a typical one, 2 windows, both open, some flowers arrangements in each corner. Julie wrinkled her nose as a strange smell pierced her nostrils. Eyes searched the room for the source of the awful smell. She frowned as they settled on the table. A sage burned almost unnoticed on it. "I was beginning to wonder if I misheard you." The only person in the room, a woman with enviable blonde hair that curled all the way to her mid-back, rose gracefully from her mat and hugged Ciara. Julie couldn't explain it, but a sudden calm overwhelmed her. She suddenly felt like she had nothing to be worried about, and all her worries were just that, worries that wouldn't mean much. She released a breath. She was going to be fine. "I wouldn't trust anyone else with this, Aaliyah." Ciara smiled and hugged her back. The lady, Aaliyah, curtsied, her head bowed. "Good to have you in my quaint little spot, Luna. Ciara, please." She rose to her full height and gestures towards the mat across from hers. "Sit," she offered. Luna gestured for Julie to take a spot on the mat, and she obeyed. The women exchanged pleasantries like they'd been longtime friends, but Julie could still tell from the way Aaliyah would add a subtle nod of her head, or never spoke over Ciara, that she respected her position as Luna, and wasn't going to override that, despite their friendship. Julie decided she liked her. She would be just perfect to teach her how to be a good enough Luna without losing herself in the process. Now, the first thing you should know about the wolf packs is the number. Currently in this area, we have about 3 major packs. Ours, Ada's, and the lesser one, which is majorly controlled by Roland and Alexis. Ours is the strongest of all 3, then Ada's, then Roland's. Luna nodded in agreement. Julie balanced on the mat as she went further explaining the hierarchy, what it meant for each pack, how each pack had a territory the other needed permission to cross or a war could break out, how important alliances were for the packs in their area and far away. Luna nodded along in agreement, and Julie absorbed it all with rapt attention. "Now about caring for a pup. It isn't the easiest, especially for a human," she smiled kindly. "But I'm sure you'd get the hang of it," she assured. "I'd just give you a brief introduction, but as we go along with our classes, I'm sure you'd know enough to teach even a wolf how to." "Okay, I was getting worried for a second there," Julie laughed nervously. Ciara squeezed Julie's hand and she relaxed. Aaliyah began her lecture on how wolf puppies are very similar to humans, but birth faster, grow faster, and crave more. how they needed to be taught to hunt from a very young age and everything there was to know about puppy care. By the end of it, Julie's head threatened to explode, but she needed to keep going. She could see the expectation in Ciara's eyes, and she would rather pass out than disappoint her. She was going to prove she was worthy enough to be Luna, even though it involved going through hours of classes. It was the least she could do, especially when she had taken time out just to guide her through it. "Thank you so much, Alia. I'm only glad I could help in some way." Isla smiled from the doorway. "Thank you." Julie beamed and left, just excited that she didn't have to search the net again for all these. She doubted she would even find something like that on there. Luna pulled her to her side and led them to their next stop. It was a room just down the hall, very similar to Alia's, but instead of the odd smell of burning sage, it smelled like sweat and rubber. "This is where you get to learn about hunting. Every wolf or Luna needs to know how to." Luna explained. "Ritual preparations too, that's the marking. There are things that need to be done if it's to be uneventful," she continued. "Ezra," she gestured to a bulky man waiting on the mat, "would put you through," she informed and guided her towards the mat. Ciara watched Julie with pride. She hadn't expected this from her at first glance, especially since she was a human, but the girl impressed her even more with each passing day. From how seriously she was taking the courses to how quick she grabbed what she was taught. Julie returned gasping after a few hours. Ciara chuckled. "Come on, let's get you back. You've really outdone yourself today." Julie let Ciara lead, too exhausted to walk on her own. The guard pushed the door open as they approached. He bowed as they crossed the doorway, and Luna nodded her acknowledgement. Julie winced as the ache spread, but managed to smile at Ciara. "Thank you for today." Something warmed in Ciara as she watched her struggle to stay calm despite the pain. "That's it. We have to throw a welcome party for you," she announced. Her nerves tingled with excitement as she exited the room. "Oh," she spun on her heels. "Don't forget to start preparing for the marking ceremony," she said before she walked off. "Come on, you need to get dressed or you'd be late to your own ceremony." A girl with a floral crown pulled on her arm. Julie groaned and turned on her sides and away from the disturbance. Laughter rang in the air from more than one person. Julie jolted awake, eyes wide and apprehensive. "Relax, we were sent by Luna Ciara to help you get dressed," the flower crown girl explained. "I'm Taylor." She beamed. "That's Trisha," she gestured towards a red head with a similar crown. "And that's Becca," she gestured towards a blonde just like her, except Becca's wore really neat locks while Taylor wore her hair down freely but neatly brushed. They both waved, holding back laughter as they watched Julie stretch and yawn. "Oh, why do I need to get dressed?" she yawned. They all shared a look. "It's your marking ceremony today." Taylor arched a brow. The other girls nodded their heads in agreement. "And we really didn't want to wake you earlier, but we have less than an hour now to get you ready." Trisha rushed. Her fingers twitched. She looked back at the door before fixing her gaze on Julie. "Oh," Julie whispered and pulled the sheets back. "Can't I just wear what I usually wear?" Their gasps were just the answer. "Your marking ceremony is as good as your wedding ceremony," Becca rebuked. "Exactly. Would you wear a plain old dress to that?" Trisha exclaimed, then slammed her lips shut, like she hadn't expected to actually speak out loud. "I see," Julie muttered. "Good. Now off you go. Take a shower and come back. Let's handle the rest." Taylor urged her towards the bathroom. Julie yawned all the way to the adjoining bathroom, but she made it in one piece. She hurriedly took a shower and came out to three girls smirking at her. She found the reason for their sudden mischievous smile when her eyes settled on the black dress on her now neatly laid bed. "Luna just had the perfect dress delivered," Becca beamed. "She must really like you." Taylor ran her fingers through the dress, the fabric soft against her palm. "I mean, it's not hard to see why," Trisha whispered. They all nodded their head in agreement just before they ambushed her. Becca grabbed at her hair. Taylor stabled her face and went on the attack with a makeup brush and some foundation. Trisha began rummaging through her shoes and matched each one with her skin tone. After hours of being bathed in powder, hairspray, and a squeal from Trisha, when she finally found a pair of heels she described as simply perfect, Julie felt more dressed up than she ever had in a while. She took a glance at herself in the mirror and held back a gasp. She expected to see a stranger with all the swiping of the brush Taylor had done, but she actually still looked the same. If anything, Taylor had just highlighted her best features without taking too much from her natural look. She loved it. She grinned as she dipped into the long, flowing black dress with tiny specks of glitter scattered uniformly across it. It was a stark contrast to her skin, which made it even more flattering, especially with how it hugged her shape in all the right places. The plunging neckline normally would have made her uncomfortable, but with the necklace Becca clasped behind her, it looked like the dress for her. She suddenly felt giddy. She knew she shouldn't, considering it was all fake, contracted, something she shouldn't take seriously, but she couldn't help it. It all felt so surreal. She felt like a gorgeous goddess. The girls stepped back to admire their work. Taylor whistled. "I wish we could warn Alpha Khai." "Warn him? Why?" Julie asked, worried, her eyebrows creased together. "He's about to get a heart attack from how stunning you look," Taylor giggled. Julie rolled her eyes. She would smack the girl upside her hair if she wasn't blushing so hard. Would he think so too? Why did she care? He couldn't. Julie forced on a smile. She wasn't going to suddenly look sad on her own marking ceremony. Even if everything was fake, she could at least enjoy it. Everyone had been so welcoming too. Least she could do was to respect their efforts by at least trying to enjoy it, which, if the past hour had been any indication, wouldn't be so hard to do. Julie stood shocked to her bone. She wasn't sure what she was expected to say. She didn't want to believe it, but it was a very big possibility. Ada could have told her father about the baby, but she didn't want to believe she would betray her trust like that. "Sorry?" Her heart pounded in her chest as he stalked closer, his eyes commanding just like his walk. He oozed the same commanding aura Khai did. So this is what it meant to be an alpha. We both know I didn't stutter. He fired. "Okay, let me rephrase. That baby isn't Khai's, is it?" His face was void of emotions. His gray hair gave him an even older look. Julie let out a breath. Her shoulder sagged. Her racing heart slowed. Ada hadn't told her father anything. It didn't fit what he said. As far as Ada was concerned, the baby was Khai's, not Adrian's. Julie, feeling much calmer, said, "Who else's could it be?" Shock passed through Dan's eyes, lasting only a second, but Julie caught it and had to hold back her smug smile. Of course, he hadn't expected her to be so bold as to counter him. Feeling bolder, "I think what we should be bothered about, however, is how much disrespect you've accorded Khai by calling him a liar." She mused aloud. "I didn't say." "Oh, but you did." She cut him off. She planned to feed off his shock. "You not only called his wife and the next Luna a liar, but you called him a liar as well. I mean, you didn't even stutter." Her eyes trailed to his as she emphasized on his snappy remark from earlier. The smug smile spread across her lips unchecked, the look of pure dismay on Dan's face, the icing on the already sugary sweet cake. He blinked and the look was gone. In its place was his usual blank mask. "I wouldn't be so happy if I were you," he warned. Anger swirled behind his mask. "I mean, it's only a matter of time before Khai tires of your weakness and sends you on a hike. Might be now or later, but it's going to happen, Luna." He mocked, an ugly smile on his face. Julie glared at him. Ada she had disliked because of their first meeting, but her father? Julie loathed him. He had not only called her child a means to an end, but had insulted her integrity as well, and even gone further to spit on her relationship with Khai. She gritted her teeth to stop from reacting, not when only God knows how many eyes were on them. Dan arched a brow in challenge. His eyes dared her to act on her impulse. Dan straightened, his mask shoved off as his eyes reflected pure rage. Julie turned to see what had gotten his attention, to see Khai and Ada return. Dan pulled her arm while she was distracted. "I mean, look at that! Can't you see they're meant together?" He yelled in her ear. Julie struggled to free her arms from his grasp, but it was no use. He moved close behind her. "No pup or relationship out of the blues can change that," he whispered in her ear. Julie winced in pain as his grip on her arm tightened. "My advice? Leave while you still have some dignity. No need to wait for him to find out that child isn't his and send you out himself." He shoved her arm aside as Khai and Ada got closer. Trust me, you never want to be on the receiving end of his wrath." He smirked at Julie's frightened face. Ada rushed to her father's side and pulled him away from Julie. "What are you up to again, father?" she demanded. She glared so intensely, Julie almost forgot Dan was her father. "Nothing, just giving her a little fatherly advice." He tossed a sinister smile her way. Khai wrapped his arm around her waist in a protective way that made Julie melt and all the fear disappear. Ada pulled at her father's arm in an attempt to take him away. Dan angrily pulled his arm from Ada. "I'm your father, not your child. You would give me that respect," he snapped. "Let's go." Ada grounded out. "And why should I listen to you? You know whatever I've told that human is the truth. Someone needs to open her eyes to these things." Dan shrugged despite the deadly glare Ada gave him. Ada fisted her hands, embarrassed her father was making a scene despite the crowd around them, basically forcing her on Khai, despite the fact that they came there to celebrate Julie's marking ceremony. As the daughter of an alpha, she has prided herself on her ability to contribute to the wolf pack, but as she looked at how Khai wrapped his arms around Julie, she knew it would be impossible for Khai and her to ever stand a chance at marriage. "If you still consider me to be your child, you would just let this go and stop embarrassing yourself like this." She grounded out through gritted teeth. Dan's head snapped to Ada in a split second. His hands balled into fist, his veins popped. The anger radiated off of him. Ada slammed her lips shut as he stalked towards her. Dan lifted a hand, his face red with anger. "Help her," Julie whispered to Khai, panicked. Dan's hand dipped in a swiping motion, barely 2 inches from Ada's face. Ada shut her eyes, waiting for the approaching pain. Her eyes fluttered open after 10 seconds without any contact. Khai stood before her, his body shadowed her like she wasn't even there. His hand held Dan's tightly. The man's eyes widened in shock as he looked between himself and Ada, and his hand which sent jabs of pain as Khai squeezed it tight enough to break a bone. From the corner of his eyes, he watched Ada's eyes glistened with tears just before she ran off. Pain rang through Dan's body as Khai squeezed tight, pulling Dan's attention back to himself. "I need you to get it through your thick skull that Julie is my Luna and she is carrying my child." Khai grounded, his attempt at controlling his tipper slowing failing. Dan yanked his hand free. "I do hope we can have pleasant dealings in the future, Khai," he grumbled in a cold voice. Khai shrugged and gave him a polite smile. "It's ways a pleasure working with you, Dan." Dan brought out his hand for a handshake after a long minute. Khai regarded the action with a glance on his direction, but didn't reach out to return the gesture. Julie watched the 2 men argue in silence, a personal battle involving their egos. Kai's jaw ticked in annoyance, and Julie knew she just had to do something before they broke out in a brawl. Khai wrapped an arm around hers and pulled her away from Dan and the crowd. Julie relaxed as he smiled at her. She let him pull her without protest. They crossed the aisle. They greeted other guests, which were mostly werewolves on the way, but Khai pulled on Julie's arm before he could exchange more than pleasantries. They crossed the living room where Julie had first met his parents, and she stamped her feet against the ground. "Are you really going to make the baby your heir?" she asked. The worry leaked from her voice. Khai turned to her, unsure what to say to her. The child is going to be a gamma, no doubt, so there was really no need to promise her lies. Only alpha blood can succeed the throne and be bestowed the alpha title, he told her regretfully. They passed by her personal guards and finally were safely in the solace of their shared room. He hated to see the look on her face, but loathed the feeling he got whenever he thought about who the real father of the child in her belly was. He slammed her against the wall, immediately caged her with his arms on either side of her head. "Here's a solution. How about you get pregnant for me?" he teased, a hint of mockery in his voice. "Huh?" she asked, moving away from him, only to the wall. "I said, how about we make a baby that's mine?" he smirked. Julie looked at him, waiting for his brain to function again, but he just had plastered the annoying smirk. What did he mean by that? Did he assume all he had to do was request or demand, and she'd hop right on the bed ready to fuck him because he was paying her? The urge to slap him away became overpowering, but she settled for a hard glare directed his way. The wall pressed against her back, reminding her of just how trapped she was. Maybe he did have in his grip. She couldn't help but feel cheap as she replayed the audacity in his voice. She was in a way grateful he had said it. It was a wake-up call. She had been getting carried away. It hadn't happened consciously, but somewhere along the line she had began to believe maybe what they shared could be real. She'd been a fool. Of course, he still considered her as someone he had a contract with, a contract that only bounded him to her for all of side months, after which he'd fall in love with some pretty girl he'd mate and they'd go their separate ways. Khai tilted her face upwards with her jaw. Do you want your child to be without a father, or do you have plans of crawling back to Adrian? His eyes searched hers for the answer her lips weren't giving. Julie's eyes widened in alarm. That didn't even cross my mind, I swear. She stared into his eyes and could only hope he saw the sincerity in hers. She couldn't even imagine looking Adrian in the eye after what he had done. He had not just cheated on her with her nemesis, but had tried to end her life on more than one occasion. There was no way she could go back to him, not even if she carried his child, which she didn't. But Khai didn't know that. Khai looked back at her, cautious, not quite sure if she was telling the truth or not, not sure if it would be right or wise to believe her or not. Please, you have to keep your promise. I can't, she began to plead, but her voice croaked before she could remind him why she had accepted his proposal in the first place. Khai's gaze softened as a tear slipped from her eyes. He caught it before it could complete its path down her cheeks. He didn't need her to remind him why she had subjected herself to a contract like the one he had suggested. She really was too good for this world, he thought as he rid her cheeks of any tear tracks. I just can't lose her, not without doing everything I can possibly do, she choked out. There was no way she was going to risk losing the support she had with the director's medical bills for her pride. She had no family, but even having to grow up with that knowledge hadn't been as bad as she was sure it could have been. And it was all because she had the orphanage director and the other kids at the orphanage who loved her like they were an actual family and not a bunch of people fate had brought together. If you're worried about the contract, don't worry. I won't break my end of it. I can't risk her life like that. It would not only break my heart, but the other kids at the orphanage. She explained. Her eyes demanded his frantically. Khai blew out a breath in frustration and pushed off the wall, the gentle look in his eyes when he wiped her tears gone like it had never been there, and she had only imagined it. He fought to keep his disappointment away from her curious eyes. All he had wanted was a little fun, to tease her a little, but she had interpreted his actions or motives all wrong. Okay, was all he said before he strolled into the bathroom. Julie watched him shocked. What just happened? She still stood at the same spot when he came out of the bathroom with a towel around his neck and another wrapped around his waist. He changed into his nightwear without so much as a glance in her direction. Okay. Julie watched him throw on the shirt and slip under the sheets. If she hadn't just spoken to him, she would have assumed he had no idea she was there. But she had, so she knew he had to know she still stood there. But he didn't bother making any jokes or even snapping at her. I still can't believe he found his Luna. Ciara beamed as her eyes glanced between them. Julie turned to Khai, but he kept his face straight and focused on absolutely nothing. Julie tried to hide her disappointment. She couldn't help but wonder what she had done wrong. Khai had been that way for the past few days since the marking ceremony. Usually he'd be the one to shove the sheets to the ground just to get a reaction from her, but now she barely knew when he woke up and left the room from when he slipped back in and went to bed. And worse, when they were outside the room in the midst of others, they had to play the role of sappy, happy Alpha and Luna, the newlyweds. It wasn't like he didn't play his part. He did, exactly like the script demanded, which bothered Julie more than he should. Where did that cocky bastard go? And what the too serious, predictable man seated beside her? She couldn't take her eyes off him, couldn't help but wonder what exactly she had done to make him act so cold towards her. Why did he feel the need to distance himself, toss her in the wilderness, confused and lost? Khai tells me you both would be leaving today? The Alpha, Ronald asked. Yes, we have to return back to the human society so we could get a few things sorted. Khai explained in a bored tone. Julie snapped out of her thoughts at Kai's voice. She nodded in agreement, but she couldn't take her eyes off him. She half expected, half hoped he would look back at her, just the way he usually would, but he didn't. We have to be on our way now, he informed, got up and left without bothering to offer a hand like he normally would. The sun felt brighter but less harsh, the office less noisy, and even the workload lighter than usual. Silent chatters ran through the workspace. Even Sebastian was 2 tables over yapping about some models. Julie typed away at her keypad, her mind calmer, the thoughts only of work. She leaned back into her chair as she typed. An unusual sense of ease settled over her chest. Under Kai's insistence, they had returned to the human society a few days ago. She had secretly hoped he planned to let whatever bothered him go, or at least talk to her about it since they were no longer surrounded by werewolves, but he hadn't. Instead, he had slammed the car door shut and walked ahead to his bedroom, leaving Julie to struggle with her bags. That had been the last straw. As she watched him walk away without so much as a single glance back in her direction, she swore not to bother herself about it again. And since she stopped worrying about what she could have done wrong that made him so crossed, she could not deny that she'd felt a strange sense of peace. Julie let out a breath. Initially, when she made her decision, she had thought it would help keep her distance from Khai. It had to some extent, but there was only so much that could do. Not when they not only lived together under the same roof, but also worked in the same company. But despite that, she could not deny the past few days of peace had been really good on her nerves. Julie, Sebastian called. Julie was so lost in her bubble, she assumed he was addressing a different staff. Julie, he yelled, his hand wedged at his hips. Julie's head was snapped his direction, her hands fumbled to grab the pens that slipped to the floor in her haste. What? She glared at Sebastian. Where were you? Obviously I've been here doing what I'm being paid to do. When Grilla, she snapped as she slipped the last pen into the plastic cup. Well, I've been calling you like a normal person would, but that didn't seem to be working. He shrugged. Julie rolled her eyes. What did you need me for? Sebastian made a non-committal sound with his teeth and tongue. Not me, the boss. He's asked to see you in his office now. Julie fought the urge to smack her head against the desk. Just when everything was going great and she was beginning to enjoy their non-communication thing, of course he chose that moment to remind her there was no escaping him. Thanks, she muttered and began the dreadful walk to Kai's office. What did he want this time? He seemed perfectly capable of everything when he didn't say a word throughout the drive back. Her hands shook as she knocked. Once, twice. No response. She had no idea what to expect, considering he hadn't spoken more than a word to her since. She turned the handle and let herself in. Khai sat annoyingly calm in his black leather swivel chair. His desk was mostly free, save for a few files beside his laptop. You sent for me? Khai eyes lifted at her voice, his attention pulled from the mail from the mayor and back to Julie, just like every time she walked into the house or when he went for his lunch break and saw her still typing furiously at her system. His eyes soaked everything that was her in. Yes, he had gotten glance and peeks the past few days, but he hadn't had the chance to actually see her. She looked mostly fine. Her hair was let down today. Was she teasing him, trying to get a reaction out of him? No, that didn't sound like Julie, but whether she knew it or not, she was teasing him. Her eyes looked tired, like she hadn't slept properly in days, which made no sense because he had watched her sleep like a baby every night since they arrived. He had been the one tossing and turning in bed, wondering what he had done to earn himself the silent treatment. He suddenly hated himself as he said, I need you to run a double check on Mr. Steele's contract. We might need to put an end to that soon, and we can't suffer any backlash from it, so coalesce with Mrs. Pam and get back to me as soon as possible. He tossed a file with Mr. Steele stamped on it. As he searched the small pile for the next one, he felt like kicking himself because she didn't need to do any of it. Mrs. Pam was very capable of handling early contract terminations herself. She was the best at it. but he couldn't think of any other way he could see her without ringing her alarm bells. Julie nodded just as he tossed the second file with Palmington stamped on it. "We're to acquire that property within the week. I need you to run a background check on its owners. Feel free to ask Edward for some guidance, but you have to be heading the checks." He explained, half expecting a complaint at that, because it was too obvious that was not a task she should be assigned. Edward was always the go-to for background checks. The office staff in management had no business with background check. That was the research department's job. Julie nodded and added that file to the Mr. Steele file under her arm. Khai's jaw ticked. Okay, she wasn't going to give anything. "We'd see about that," he muttered inaudibly as he leaned back on his chair. "The last one isn't work-related, but I feel you have great taste, so it has to be you." He watched her over the rim of his glasses. She had to react now. He waited for the complaint, for her to point out that if it wasn't work-related, then it shouldn't be her problem. He waited 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 ticks of the clock. She didn't. He huffed, frustrated with her silence. He wrote something down on a paper and handed it to her. "I need you to send some flowers, jewelries, and whatever women like to this address." A flash of something intangible crossed her eyes, and Khai smirked. So she wasn't a complete robot then. He waited for what he knew for sure laid at the top of her tongue, for that reaction. Nothing. He gripped his desk to stop himself from doing anything drastic as she nodded and moved to leave. "Don't you have anything to say?" The words slipped from his lips before he could stop them. Julie halted. She knew what he meant, but she wasn't going to make it that easy for him, not when he was comfortable going days without so much as 2 words. "I don't understand, sir," she said from her spot in front of his desk. Khai's eyes flared for all of 2 seconds before the indifference returned. "Why haven't you spoken to me for the past week? Do you find me that intimidating?" His usual smirk was missing, a smile a mile away. All Julie saw was concern, but she refused to believe that. It made no sense why he would be. Julie kept her mouth shut despite the rant she would love to give. She wasn't about to give him something he refused her. An explanation. "Would there be anything else, sir?" She avoided his eyes like her life depended on it. Khai stared at her, baffled at her reluctance to speak. He wanted to reach for her, get her to talk to him, and quit the boss-staff relationship. He blew out a breath. "We would be meeting with the human representative soon." Khai said, a final attempt at getting some sort of reaction from her. Julie nodded. "All right, sir, would that be all?" She could feel his piercing gaze on her, but she kept her bowed. "Yeah," he drawled. "Just grab these and go." He gestured at the files beside his laptop. Julie eyes the heap of browns like they were bombs and not just files. She considered stretching over the desk to grab them, but that would mean risking putting her cleavage out on display. She moved around the desk to grab the files and moved to leave immediately, her fingers wrapped around the files. She had barely taken a step when rough hands wrapped around her wrist. She shrieked as the hand pulled, and she felt warm skin against her butt. Khai's arms wrapped around her, and she tried so hard to fight it, but the longer they held onto her, the weaker her resolve. She leaned into his touch, almost laughing at herself for how much she deluded herself that she didn't yearn for his touch. He searched her eyes for permission. Julie wanted to say no, just to hurt him like he'd hurt her when he started ignoring her. She struggled not to grab onto his neck, but as she looked into his eyes, saw the want and desire behind those eyes, she wrapped her arms around his neck. Khai didn't need anything else. He pushed gently against her back and closed the distance. He tilted her head and kissed her like he'd wanted to since they got back, like he'd wanted to when he had her against the wall. All the frustration and pent-up anger he felt he poured into the kiss. Julie returned his kiss with as much urgency as he kissed her. She ran her hands up and down his hair, not caring if she made a total mess of it. All she could think about was Khai and how good she felt kissing him. Khai nibbled on her bottom lip, and a moan slipped from her throat before she could stop it. He took the opportunity and slipped his tongue, taking the first step to a dance between her tongue and his. He groaned as Julie deepened the kiss, her hips grinding against his. He gripped her as hard enough to leave a mark, his hand print but instead of a cry of pain, Julie moaned, making him go mad. He broke the kiss, both panted for air, but Khai wasn't even close to being done. His lips trailed from her lips, across her jaw and down her neck. Julie's eyes fluttered closed as he nibbled on the skin, placed kisses on her neck like a starved man. He lifted his head, a smile on his face. Julie rubbed against her neck, her eyes widened as she felt it. A hickey. She glared at him, but before she could process her line of thought, his lips were on hers again, and she was losing her will to be anything but with Khai. Khai broke the kiss again and let her slid off his lap. A smile stuck on his face as he stared at his handiwork. Julie shook her head as she finally took a peek at what he'd created. He was freaking insane, she thought. She shoved her hair forward to cover it, grabbed the files and left. All the while she fought the urge to remind him that they were at their workplace and not the wolf pack. She hummed as she finished the last of her assignments for the day. She wasn't going to attribute her sudden good mood to Khai. No, she was certain it had everything to do with the chocolate she planned to get after work. After a few hours, she was done and packed her items in the files Khai had given her and was happily on her way out of work. She stopped halfway to her car. She searched the quiet lot for signs of anyone. She could have sworn that someone was watching her, but as her eyes scanned the lot, the only movement she saw was a chocolate wrapper falling off the top of an overfilled trash can. She shrugged it off and closed the distance to her car. She drove but couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed, but by who? She turned off the ignition as she got off at the supermarket lot. She only taken a step from her car when the feeling returned, impossible to ignore. She flipped her head a speed too fast, instantly regretting it when her eyes fell on the man that haunted her dreams. Adrian. Julie's feet moved faster than her brain as she moved backwards. Her hand dipped into her purse as she searched for something she never put there. Her fingers shook as she rummaged the purse for something, anything she could use to defend herself. Sweat dripped down her forehead as she felt nothing but a few dollar bills and receipts. Not even a pen. Her steps quickened. Despite the noise from the busy sidewalk, Julie could hear her heart pound against her chest. She spared a glance over her shoulder as she brisk walked through the sidewalk. He was still there. Her only solace were the cars that sped past and the light from the stores that casted a bright hue over the sidewalk. Her heart lunged into her throat as she looked overhead. She was headed towards the less busy side of the street, where all the noise would stop and stores never bothered to extend to. She risked a glance back again, her palms sweaty as she fisted them. He was still on her tail with a weird smile on his face. She considered turning back. The last thing she wanted was to leave the safety of the buzzing street, but that would mean walking right into his arms. She didn't do her usual routine. She ran into the road and across, earning a few curses thrown her way as she narrowly escaped the bumper of a car. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Her legs ached as she pushed forward, heading back where she came from in the opposite side walk. He had to have lost her, she thought, as she snuck another peek over her shoulders. She yelped as she saw him not just still on her tail, but closer. How was that possible? Her breathing came out faster as she increased her pace. He easily kept up. Why hadn't she just driven away in her car when she had the chance? Why did she have to stop for stupid chocolates? If she died, what would be her story? She gave in to her cravings and died without even satisfying them? No. Her feet stamped against the concrete floor. Her heart pumped impossibly faster as she turned to face her fear. Adrian still had on the creepy smile as he closed the distance. Her body trembled as he took 2 more steps, standing just an arm length away. "Why are you following me?" She dug her nails into her palms as her voice croaked. His smile broadened as he shrugged. "I just wanted to talk to you," he said. He stalked closer. "Have no idea why you decided to play cat and mouse." Julie held her breath as he took yet another step closer. She backed away, not caring if she hit her head against a lamppost that looked like a much better fate than whatever Adrian probably had planned for her. Her feet moved faster than she expected, considering she had her eyes pinned on Adrian as she backed away. But still, she couldn't match Christian's speed. For every 2 steps she took, he took one big one. She flipped, all thoughts of keeping an eye on him forgotten as she raced away from him. She ran as fast her legs could carry her, wondering why no one saw she needed help or got in his way as he stalked her. She sighed in relief as her car came into view. She'd been stupid to leave it in the first place. She'd been just few more pants-filled jogs from the car when a hand slammed over her mouth. Her eyes widened in fear. A strange smell creeped up her nostrils. The occasion stung on her nose, like acid but not quite burning through her skin. Tears slipped down her cheeks as the harsh chemical teased her eyeballs. She struggled and shoved behind her blindly as the smell became unbearable. "Let me go!" The words came out muffled. The cotton handkerchief suffocated her, the harder she struggled, but she couldn't stop. There was no stopping. That only meant she'd be left at the mercy of Adrian if she did. Her muscles felt weaker, even as she shoved behind her with all her might. Ouch! A cry came from behind her as her elbow made contact with his nose, the first actual hit amongst about a dozen. She waited with bated breath for his hold to loosen. The longer she waited, the weaker she felt. Her eyes fluttered for a second, but she shoved them open. She shoved back in that direction a second time, but met air. "Let me go." The words escaped her lips, weaker and barely audible over the material. She blinked slowly at her car, her vision blurred, the car a cloudy image. She shook her head to clear her eyes but could barely move it to the side before her eyes fluttered again. A heavy feeling settled in her chest as she kicked and shoved a final time, her sorry attempt to fight, but her body wouldn't support her. She crashed to the ground, her muscles there, but not quite hers anymore. She struggled to keep her eyelids open despite the sudden exhaustion that flooded over her body, flowed through her veins and clouded her senses. "You see, there was really no need to run, Julie. Could have saved us a lot of time," he huffed as he lifted her almost limp body into his embrace. "Now look, you've hurt yourself." He forced as he pulled on both her arms. "Please, let me go," she mustered. Her eyes searched for his, so her saw the sincerity and begging in hers. He looked at her for a second. Something akin to thoughtfulness swirled in his eyes and was gone once she blinked. In its place, a sinister smile spread across his face as he said, What happened to all that bravado, Jules?" He mocked. "Don't worry, I promised all we're going to do is talk, okay?" He cooed. A dark rumble escaped his chest as he pulled on her arms again. The car was closer. A red Mustang either left running or he had an accomplice who awaited their arrival. That car and Adrian's sinister smile were the last things her eyes registered before the darkness enveloped her, tossing aside with its presence her consciousness. Julie's eyes snapped open. Her brows creased in confusion as she took in her surroundings. There were only 2 tiny windows, one on the far left and the other right across from her, so it definitely wasn't Khai's bedroom. It even had a crack in it, which was something Khai would never let happen. Her panic rose as her eyes swept from the table of instruments a few distance away from her, to the absence of proper lighting, just a flickering dim bulb, and finally settled on the faded blood tracks on the cracked walls. Some of the chipped of paint littered the broken concrete floor. She released a breath as she noted the absence of anyone else in the room. She got up to leave only to be shoved back down. She winced as pain shot from her ankle, up her legs. Her pulse quickened as she finally noticed the ropes knotted tightly around her arms and tugged tightly at her feet. She shuffled to break free, to slip her hands through, but the ropes were knotted expertly tight. Panic surged through her as her eyes moved frantically across the room. Her eyes widened in fear as she took it all in, the crack in the unplastered wall, the absence of even a single sound since she woke up, the absence of a door, just a doorway. The rumbles against her feet confirmed her suspicions. She tugged at the professional worthy restraints as the realization of how much trouble she was in dawned on her. She was in an abandoned building. She choked on air as the smell of dust invaded her nostrils, and residues rested on her nose which caused her to sneeze. The action caused her to slam her eyes shut in pain as the ropes pressed against her skin. Moonlight filtered in through the broken windows, casting eerie shadows in every corner. Just slammed her eyes shut and forced a slow breath out as images of the sunset and a body of water just in front of it crossed her mind. Panicking would not do anything to help her, but would rather make her act a fool. She needed to be calm. She needed to relax, she chanted. How could she? She was trapped in and abandoned by her ex-fiancé. Calm was the last emotion she felt. Breath, Julie. You need to breathe and calm down, she chanted. She released a shaky breath as her eyes roamed the room a second time. Her resolve weakened as she did. The cracks didn't look new. The window design was a very old one. Even the smell of the place smelled old. Very old. The building had to have been deserted for a long time. Julie began to panic as she realized even if she were to scream, no one would probably be around to hear her. She released another shaky breath. Once, twice, thrice. She made a puff of air with her mouth as she felt a little calmer. An idea popped in her mind, and her eyes shone with hope as they fell on the rope that bound her. She could struggle enough, wiggle enough to loosen its hold on her. Then she could make a run for it. She twisted her wrist, testing its function before she began pulling in the opposite direction to her restraints. She pulled at the rope, slamming her lips shut with each tug that sent pain shooting through her. She yanked at it with as much force as she could muster. But the stronger her yanks, the weaker she felt, and the more impossible it felt to exert just the right amount of force she needed to do anything tangible enough to help free her arms or her feet. Julie slammed her eyes shut and gave the next pill as much force as she could muster, but it still wasn't close to half of what she needed to truly be free. She huffed in frustration. Her arms and feet felt like noodles. Her breaths came out in pants, and her heart raced just as much as sweat slipped down her temple and into her clothes. Julie felt like she'd been working like a laborer for hours by the time she dumped against the back slab of the chair. She sat there for a few minutes to catch her breath. Her chest heaved up and down faster than ever as she struggled to go from panting to actually breathing. She tried leaning forward as she shook her head. She couldn't believe what was happening. She was not only taken by Adrian to an abandoned building so late at night, but he'd indirectly taken her chances at freeing herself. Not just by tying her, but by drugging her with whatever had been in Thag's handkerchief. Whatever it was, it took away her strength to fight, her strength to do something as basic as twist her wrist or tug at her ankles with the right amount for force to make the knot slip. She shrugged off the pain, deciding she would be in even more pain if Adrian were to find her still in that room. She pulled harder, twisted harder. Sweat dripped down her neck and stained her clothes, but she didn't care, not when Adrian was probably just few distances away from seriously harming her. That one thought triggered her to pour all her strength into it. She tugged harder and twisted harder still, wincing every time the rope made contact with bare skin. Her head tipped back as sharp pain ran through her with another twist of her wrist. She gritted her teeth to stop from screaming as she pulled her ankle upwards, her exhaustion slowly easing, replaced by something euphoric, something triggered by fear and the need for flight. She gasped in pure relief when the ropes on her wrist slipped a little and the one on her leg tugged less tightly on her ankle. She began twisting and tugging even harder. She'd been given hope, and she was not going to let that go to waste, not when it meant she could be free soon. She'd been so busy trying to break free, she barely noticed how red her wrists had become, how tender they were. She just continued, the adrenaline pumped through her vein like a drug urging her on despite the pain. Her struggling froze, her movements stilled, her ears perked up at the sound of footsteps. She strained, but she was sure she wasn't mistaken. There were footsteps just outside the warehouse. "Shit!"